Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Franklin Board of Education meeting for Wednesday, October 25th, 2023. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Dr. Beer.
Here.
Mrs. Witkowski.
Here.
Dr. Kahn.
Here.
Mrs. Sapersky.
Here.
Mrs. Yank.
Here.
Mr. Sprague.
Here.
We are all present.
Thank you, and the meeting has been properly posted. Can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion was made by Mrs. Witkowski, seconded by Mrs. Sapersky. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Community comment. Participants under this agenda item must be residents of Franklin Public Schools. Please talk for only 3 minutes. And the board may not discuss a comment or question that does not relate to an agenda item. And I only have one person signed up. Jennifer Shipley, please. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Shipley. I reside at 5341 West Harvard Drive in Franklin. First, I would like to introduce myself a little bit. I attend these meetings regularly, and I wear 3 hats while I'm here in your audience. I'm a taxpayer. My husband and I moved to the city of Franklin by choice over 20 years ago, knowing that we wanted to have children, and the school district was top of mind when we chose our community. I'm a parent. I'm a parent of 2 children who have attended their entire educational career in the school district of Franklin from kindergarten on up. Lastly, I'm an employee of our district. I work as an educational assistant at Ben Franklin Elementary, and I'm amazed at the different roles I play throughout my day, every day. There are 2 points I'd like to speak on tonight, and I will talk quickly. I was extremely offended at the end of the prior board meeting on October 11th on comments that were made by one member who was reflecting on a positive meeting with the school administrator, making her almost wanting to go back into a classroom role. Then other board members and school administrators took the opportunity to joke about the realities of being in the classroom, not as a positive place to be, and happy others do it, but not them. Please remember your audience and who you represent. The room was filled last time with your staff that are in classrooms every day and were here showing their passion for what they're worth. Would those same jokes have been made if they were still in the audience at the end of the meeting? Our teachers and support staff are in the trenches of the classroom every day by choice. Hearing our administrators joke about how they would not want to do that job is offensive. Let's be thankful for the staff who want to do those jobs every day for a much lower rate than the lofty administrative roles. Secondly, as you consider tonight's budget, know that the decisions you make have financial implications to all citizens in our community. Tonight's budget and tax levy will be approved during continued inflationary rate increases unlike any that we have ever seen for many years. The inflationary instability we are feeling now changes how people in our community are able to live and maintain the standard of living that they are used to in our community. Please keep in mind the implication of this budget, not only to the staff, but also to the taxpayer. Spend what is necessary for today, not what is desired. Make a plan for what is needed for the future before you spend it. And thank you all for your service to our community.
Thank you. All right, I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion was made by Mrs. Larkson, seconded by Mrs. Witkowski. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. School board calendar. We have a school board retreat Monday, October 30th at the ECC at 5:30. A regular Board of Education meeting Wednesday, November 8th, 2023 at 6. A retreat on Wednesday, November 15th, 2023 at the ECC at 6. Board of Education meeting Wednesday, December 6th at 6. And a school board workshop Wednesday, December 13th, 2023, also at the ECC. District Administrator update. Mrs. Bennon, please.
All right, good evening. Tonight, we're excited to have Forest Park Middle School a variety of staff members and students and administration with us to talk about their equitable multi-level system of support that they're putting in at the middle school for this school year. This is our first school presentation of the year, so we're excited to get that rolling. We'll have every school in front of us at some point through the year, always kind of showcasing some action step that they're doing in their school that relates directly to their school improvement plan, which ties directly to our district coherence plan. We're also excited to announce that we have our date set for a listening session or community session with families of students with special needs. So Leo Ekman's been leading that, and we're going to have that meeting on Monday, November 6th at the high school. This is focused for our 6th through 12th grade families, and that's at 5:30 that evening. We'll also have Katie there, who's our district parent liaison, who many of us have met through board meetings this year and through some of our district newsletters. Franklin has their trunk and treat coming up tomorrow evening. And why I bring this up at a school board meeting is it's kind of fun that Andy Daniels and his team have thought of creative ways that the school can also participate in having a trunk and thinking about the age of students or kids in the community that are coming out to trick or treat, what might be interesting for them to see that a school has to offer as far as vehicles. So we're excited for that, just a different way to connect with our community. We're also thankful to our parents that will have their children at home or with someone Friday so that we're able to have professional development with our staff. It's a really important time for us, but we know it's hard to ask our families to adjust their family calendar. We continue to do work in our continued improvement around curriculum, spending time in our K-12 system with our educators. And then we also have Gear Up sessions, which is, I've talked about these a few times, the staff gets choice into learning around areas that align to the coherence plan and what that looks like. And then in the afternoon, in their building with their administrators, usually working around school improvement plans and different specific action steps they've planned there. Last board meeting we were together, I was able to mention that we have a Better Place to Work task force that's starting through entry interviews, meet and greets, and a variety of other stay interviews last year, a variety of other avenues. We've learned that there's a high interest in our workforce, our teachers, our aides, our custodial, our food, all of our areas to look at what does it look like, sound like, and feel like to work in Franklin. So we had our first meeting last Thursday, led by Andy Cromie and Laura Lancor. It was a really good opportunity to come together in a group, talk about our why of being there, come up with an exhaustive list of what are areas that we'd want to look at. And then that group started to identify what are kind of the top 5 areas that they're seeing as an interest. We're really grateful for the group that has come together, and they know that they're also the avenue of communication back to the schools to make sure that this is really an inclusive conversation of where we feel and want to be. So they'll be going back, presenting some of that information, actually all of that information to their staff in a staff meeting between now and November 15th when that team comes back together. And also doing a quick survey with the staff there to look at, is there anything we missed on that list that we want to look at when we start defining what it means to be a better place to work. So I'll continue to bring updates to the board from that. Like I said, November 15th is our next time together. And then this evening, we'll continue our conversations around Franklin Forward. So for board members, you have a binder at your spot. We just put together the presentations thus far that we've had, and we'll continue to bring them 3-hole punch so you kind of have everything in one spot and can bring that back to every meeting. So more about that when we get to that agenda item, but otherwise I'm very grateful that we have a number of people from different schools in our audience tonight to present a variety of different information and things that we should be proud of in our school community. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Forest Park Middle School presentation. Ms. Roszensky, please, et al.
You came with strength in numbers. I'll stand. You did. Do you need more chairs? All right. All right. Got everybody? We got all here. Oh, there's another chair. Anybody else? All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Jenna Roszensky. I'm the principal at Forest Park Middle School. We're really excited to be here tonight to share the beginning steps of our Forest Park Middle School school-wide implementation of equitable multi-level systems of support, or EMLSS. In alignment with our coherence plan, Tactic 1, our goal is to provide universal access and foster growth for all students. Each house team at Forest Park and Encore team convenes on a basis of 4, 6, and 12-week cycles to ensure that we're meeting the needs of all students at a Tier 1 level, and if not, we ask ourselves, what steps should we take next? A key structural component of EMLSS is making sure our schedule is conducive to collaboration and also included various stakeholders at the table to problem solve and seek solutions. That being said, I'd like to take a moment and introduce our team presenting here tonight, which represents a variety of key stakeholders and perspectives at Forest Park Middle School. So I'm Jenna Rzinski, I'm the building principal.
I'm Stephanie Schneider, one of our math interventionists in the district.
I'm Sherry Knackle, 7th grade math teacher.
I'm Adam Jensen, a instructional coach.
John Brandes, Associate Principal.
Brian Karalevich, Associate Principal.
Missy Buss, reading interventionist.
Riley Pivovarczyk, 7th grader.
So it's really important when we're talking in a lot of different acronyms to define some of our terms. So there's a half sheet in front of you that has 4 key terms that we're going to talk a lot about tonight. The first one is EMLSS. And a quick graphic on the screen there is just defining what it is and what it isn't. And I think the best part of this chart is that it's showing that it's a way to increase outcomes for all kids. So we really need to make sure when we're implementing something that we're defining it and we're all rallying around what the meaning of it is. So it's important to know that it's for all kids and it's not a way to track kids or to problem solve one kid at a time. It's really an all-in collaborative approach to seeking solutions for students.
All right, we look at these different levels of support. It's important to kind of have an understanding of the different vocabulary that we're going to use. When we talk about Tier 1 instruction, you can see that that's like the biggest block in this tiered system of supports. We're talking about universal instruction for all. And what we try to do at the building level is build our capacity for all of our staff really to be able to plan for the needs of all students, and whether that be academic, behavioral, attendance, social or emotional learning. What we try to do is make sure that we can build our staff to deliver that kind of instruction for all. And if, for whatever reason, students aren't learning or need different levels of support, we also have a Tier 2 and 3 for those needs as well.
This is the second graphic that you have in front of you. Our presentation really walks you through where it says start here, and we're going to talk through each section of what a meeting looks like. So as you follow along, we're kind of following that agenda flow that happens in our meetings that we're holding at Forest Park. So you can kind of feel the way that we talk about students and problem solve as a team, probably as big as everybody here at the table. So we'll start with just that Tier 1 about the profile from John Brandes.
Yeah, so one of the big things that we had to do from the beginning was that we had to plan out when are we going to meet as a group. We have a lot of key stakeholders that we have to bring to the table. So one of the big roles that we had at the beginning was defining like our schedule. So having a very clear schedule as to how we meet and bring key stakeholders together every 4 weeks is something that we had to map out for the entire year. So that's what that first graphic kind of represents. We also kind of talked about the idea like we need to have the avenue where people can put down their information when they bring concerns forward or wonderings forward about students. So we have a student profile that we have teachers or anyone can fill out about concerns or wonderings they have about students in the areas of behavior, SEL, attendance, academics, you name it. It's a good representation of the entire child. So it's really about providing that opportunity prior to an EMLSS meeting for our key stakeholders to kind of prepare for the students they want to talk about, complete a student profile, and then once they get to that meeting, we can start engaging and talking about how we can work towards helping a student grow.
Am I supposed to say my name? Sherry Knackle again, 7th grade math. So as a teacher, I'm really excited about this approach due to the fact that it's a team approach. It's not something that's put on the teachers to problem solve on their own. It's an approach that's driven by data, but it has many voices, including administrators, coaches, counselors, interventionists. And we're looking at the whole child, not just academics, because there are a lot of things in a child's life that can affect their performance in school beyond academics. And really, we're focused on providing the best Tier 1 instruction in all classes, because obviously good instruction is going to be good for all students. So that's a big focus on trying to see what are the best Tier 1 universal strategies for all students.
And then this is where I would come in. I'm Adam. I'm the instructional coach at the middle school. We would be searching for different Tier 1, high leverage Tier 1 strategies that would work really well for students. And so myself with the teacher would work together to kind of build out some of these strategies and implement them within the classroom. In addition to that, we also would want to be measuring it to see if it's having any sort of an effect or not. And so we'll work together as a team to kind of bring all those results back and to see if we had solved a problem or if we need to take this in a different direction or try some different strategies.
And again, I'm Stephanie Schneider. I'm one of our math interventionists. And so interventionists are a part of this team approach. In discussing data at our EMLSS meetings, if there's a student who needs additional support beyond those Tier 1 universal strategies, that's when we would start to identify Tier 2 strategies to implement to better support those students. The classroom teacher would be the one providing those Tier 2 strategies with the help and guidance of interventionists, coaches, admin, school psych, but interventionists specifically help with any academic strategies in the areas of math or reading. Coaches, psych, and admin can also help with those academic strategies, but in addition to those, they can have SEL strategies or behavior strategies that they can support for students. Interventionists can support those Tier 2 academic strategies, but sometimes by pulling small groups, co-teaching some Tier 2 strategies in the classroom, and checking in with students. The classroom teacher, once a student is identified as needing a Tier 2 support, will more closely monitor that student to see if the data is showing that that strategy is helping that student close gaps in their academic learning. This data then becomes another part of what we talk about at these EMLSS meetings. And then lastly, to best support our teachers in implementing Tier 2 strategies, right now we're really fully committed to researching more Tier 2 resources that our classroom teachers can use. We currently have vetted Tier 3 resources, but Tier 2 is kind of like our next step for finding additional resources that teachers have available to them.
And I'm Missy Bess, the reading interventionist at the middle school. As we continue to gather at the EMLSS meetings, we look closely to see what the data is telling us, and if it shows that more support is needed, then students may move into Tier 3, which is going to be the most intensive level of support. The team identifies the highest academic area of need for each student, and then we continue to monitor their growth. As a district, we are committed to using resources that have been vetted through the ESSA tiers of evidence. This ensures that we're utilizing the most effective resources available, and additionally, all interventionists complete training around these resources to ensure that they are implemented effectively as well. Currently, our math interventionists use Advantage Mathematical Recovery, known as AVMR. This addresses foundational gaps that students have in early numeracy skills. And reading interventionists at the middle school use UFly, Equip for Reading Success, and Lexia Power Up. These resources address phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, and comprehension skill gaps. We wanted to showcase one of these vetted resources tonight. This is called Equip for Reading Success. It is used to support all learners and students that need an additional layer of support in growing their foundational skills. Research has shown that when a reader has trouble reading a word or words, the most common reason is from poor phonemic awareness skills. Tonight, we are so lucky to have Riley here. She's a 7th grade student that is engaged in this work to grow as a reader and a writer. So she's going to demonstrate with me how she can manipulate singular phonemes in words through the activities that are available in this resource that we use. You ready to go? Yeah. Say brush.
Brush.
Now say brush, but don't say b.
Brush.
Say great.
Great.
Now say great, but don't say g.
Great.
Say bend.
Bend.
Now say bend, but don't say d.
Bend.
Say art.
Art.
Now say art, but don't say t.
R,
So far, she's been deleting phonemes. Now we're going to substitute them. Say dad.
dad,
Now say dad, but instead of say
did,
Say map.
map,
Now say map, but instead of say
mop,
Say paddle.
paddle,
Now say paddle, but instead of say
pedal,
Say waiter.
waiter,
Now say waiter, but instead of say
water,
And the last two, these are progressing in skills. Say try.
try,
Now say try, but don't say
tie,
And say claim.
claim,
Now say claim, but don't say
came,
As I mentioned, these progress from the basic phoneme level and we're progressing through to the advanced phoneme level, and Riley rocked all of them. Riley. So Riley, when we do activities like this, you know that it's a common practice for us to ask questions to have you reflect as a learner. How can activities like this help you grow as a reader and a writer?
It helps me sound out words when I'm reading or spelling.
All right, thanks so much, Riley.
So whenever we're thinking about implementing large systems of change in schools, we want to always ask ourselves, what is the impact of our actions? So we have 3 things that we're doing at Forest Park to really analyze that impact and know if it's working. So one of the things we do is gain feedback from our SIT team using a readiness tool that's provided by Hanover, a district research base that we use to kind of gauge if we're being successful. The other thing we use is our PD days. We're investing in those universal tier 1 strategies. So we're having our staff actually engage in what those look like in a classroom so that when we meet as a team, they're more able to use those strategies because they've seen them or tried them at professional development. And then the last thing is the Plan, Do, Study, Act model. Our SIT team is really using the closing gaps goal to look at the actions associated with EMLSS to say, are all the pieces that we're putting in place in these medians showing positive outcomes? Are students accessing tier 1 instruction strategies at a high level? So we have a lot of checks in place to make sure that when we gather as big teams, it's purposeful and meaningful, and we're really having all kids access their education at that universal level because we know that's where we find the most success. So that's what we're doing at Forest Park. Go Wildcats. Any questions for our team?
Angie, please.
Anybody can answer this. How is this different from what you've done in the past?
I think one thing that really stands out to me is like we're bringing all key stakeholders to the table. In the past, we may have had like a school psych and maybe an interventionist come to the table to talk about student progress. Now we're bringing all core teachers, on-core teachers to the table, and not only talking about academic needs, but behavioral needs, SEL needs, attendance, anything's on the table. So we're talking more holistically about the entire child.
Yeah, I would agree with him that in the past, we focused on the academic, or if there was a behavior, it was all in isolation, where this brings it all together as a team approach, but you're looking at other things. There might be something about a student you don't realize, but through this process, you find out, oh, they don't come to this class in the morning, but they're in this class in the afternoon. So looking at attendance, all those things, I can say as a teacher in the past, you felt like it was a lot on you, where now this feels like you're going to have a lot more support and it's going to be a team approach versus just the teacher.
Thanks.
Mary, go ahead.
So it's easy enough, obviously, to measure attendance. They're there or they're not there. Academically, obviously easy to measure, higher grades. But how do you measure, and maybe you don't, the behavioral and the social emotional learning? How do you tell that that's improved? How do you agree on a measure?
I could answer that. I think you've got to get a little bit more creative when measuring some of those instances. If you wanted to take a look at behavior, and maybe you take something very simple, such as a student really having a hard time staying in their seat, and so we may first start out with tier 1 strategies that involve a little bit more movement in the classroom. But we also may want to kind of monitor and tally mark even just how many times the student kind of stays in or moves out of their seat, and then really try to work with that student to minimize those particular things. Eventually, you're going to see progress, or you may not, and those are the things that we need to work through as a team. But that would be a very simplistic way of measuring something that would be more behavioral compared to the academic end of it.
Linda, please.
So the tool that you demonstrate, is that a tier 3 or is it a 2?
Yes, so this is a vetted resource for Tier 3. Going through training, I have been able to share this resource with students in classrooms, and so Riley actually engaged in this work with all of her 7th grade peers in Mrs. Boss's class, because I was able to demonstrate and have Riley model some of these activities as well. So all of the students got to participate and benefit, because it is a foundational skill that we did realize was missing in some of our core instruction historically.
So it was tier 3, but.
So it is used as a tier 3 resource. I might want to just define like a student that is identified as a student in tier 3 will get more support in the number of minutes that they're practicing something like this, and also a smaller group of students. And so it might be one-on-one or two-on-one with a reading interventionist.
Okay. And I know you said it's not special ed, but so any students with IEPs are not part of this process, or?
They are. All students get access to tier 1 high-quality universal instruction, regardless of where they are on the continuum of supports. So even if a student has a specialized plan at a tier 3, like an IEP, they still have access to universal high-quality instruction, which is where we spend the most of our time with our staff, equipping them with those strategies and modeling those so that we're able to deliver those in the classroom, because we know all students benefit from them.
Okay, thank you.
Masood, please.
Is there a plan to use the data and the map testing, which is done in fall, again in spring, to see if the strategy is working? That's my first question. Second question is also regarding the forward exam. Will that be integrated? Okay, this year we implemented this year the results of the forward exam, and now we implemented this protocol. What are the results varying?
Yeah, I think when you look at some of those pieces like MAP, we have students test, I think 3 times a year for MAP testing. And then forward is in the spring. And those are, I would look at them as somewhat lagging pieces, like they're going to happen at different points in the year. And the thing that I think is really unique and it's going to be really productive for us as teams is that we're utilizing data that might be from the classroom a week prior to share and talk about the progress we're making every day through the instruction that students are receiving from our teachers and our building. And then eventually we're going to have those bigger summative pieces at different points of the year, and we can use that data too. But some of the pieces that we are going to be using on a monthly basis are, John, Jenna, and I worked to review documents for next week's meeting, and we're putting in data that was entered in today. So it's leading data, it's like real-time data, and some of those other pieces just, they're a little lagging, and we also use those to inform. But the pieces that we can use every day is the learning that occurs in our classroom every day. And I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Is this something that, so this is new, or at least program is new. I mean, it's not new, but it's new to us this year. Is this something that we'll use at the elementary level, and then that same information will be given to you, so you're not starting with a clean slate when you come to 6th grade? Those teams you'll have the information for the kid when they get there, so you have a running start. How will that work, or how is that working now?
So I'm actually also at the elementary level, so I can speak to that. So I'm at Southwood Glen as well, so I travel between the middle school and Southwood Glen. And I'm new to the district this year, but my understanding is that the elementary school kind of had some systems more similar to EMLSS sort of already in place. Okay. The middle school, this is kind of like brand new for us, which is why we're presenting on it here. I think there are new aspects of EMLSS that the elementary is now adopting and adding into their system. But yes, it is happening at the elementary level as well, and so I think it will be a nice transition then into middle school.
It's new in the sense of, I think in the past, we've had certain meetings about just identifying students in tier 3, and those happen with an admin and a psych and maybe a teacher if their schedule allowed. This is saying like, wait, we believe in high quality universal instruction. Let's meet as a team of all the people that interact with that student, because the best knowledge base are those who work with the kid. Not necessarily me to know the next step. It's the teachers in the room that could have the strategies that we go back to before we say they need an intervention or something more intensive. And I want to clarify that that also means in the realm of accelerated as well, or extension work. We don't just talk about kids when they really need help, but we talk about kids when they also need to be pushed. This process also really brings that to light of how kids can get extension and acceleration in their classrooms. So in a way, it's just bringing everybody together of things that we did as like smaller pieces in the past, because we really should be talking about a student with everybody present to make those decisions.
Do you talk about all the kids in, Sherry's got 100 kids, say, 120. And so when her and the 3 other teachers in her, in 7th grade, Blue or whatever it is, meet, how many of those kids will you talk about at one time?
So I can answer this. Anyone can like put a student forward to be on this, spreadsheet and have this documentation done. We're trying to keep it manageable at first. So we met as teams, and between the 4 teachers kind of hashed out, okay, if we were going to pick our top 4, who are the kids that we need to start with? And of course, you always add more, but you try to keep it manageable, because these meetings are only going to be, how many minutes? 45 minutes. So anyone can put forth a student, like if guidance noticed something, they could put, so anyone can do it, but like as teachers, we're trying to work together and say, like if there's a behavior issue with a student in one class and no other teacher has that behavior issue, this is not the process for that. That would be dealt with differently. We're trying to like really hone in on what do we see, these are our most concerning students at the moment that we want to provide support for.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Lots of good vocab.
Group photo. Really exciting.
Group photo, please, in front of the Franklin.
We went through this with me at my liaison meeting. And I was
I was sitting there like, why? I was just excited I could type in the boxes.
A little closer. Maybe we need 2 lines.
Yeah.
They're all the same height, though.
Thanks, everybody.
Except for Riley.
And then just stack your chairs up on scary.
You'll get to meet her if you It's job security.
All right. She's feeling comfortable with it.
All right, new courses, teacher pathway courses. This is an action item. Dr. Moe, please.
So this is what we spoke about last time. Mr. Volo was here with us last time too, talking about our teacher pathway course. I have not had any additional inquiries, so there's no changes to what we brought last time. So unless you all have additional questions, I'll turn it back over to Mike.
Thank you. I am looking for a motion to approve the Foundations of Education course for the 24-25 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Motion was made by Mrs. Larson, seconded by Mrs. Yank. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Spring 24 early college credit and start college now request approvals. Mr. Volo, please.
We just did this.
So many options for chairs. All right, good evening, everybody. In the memo and then link through that information item, there are the enrollment that show you, again, the trends historically in terms of courses taken, courses requested, and success. And then you have the additional addendum that includes the number of total courses requested in application. So it is 22 total students requesting 139 different courses. Remember, the criteria for denying a course is that we offer a comparable course in Franklin High School. So, as I often share, that if we add additional things at the high school, then we can obviously have students do it in-house, be supported and taught by our educators. And there's nothing wrong with all the colleges who are listed here. However, if we have things in-house, it, also is likely to have more success even and more access for all our students. So, are there any questions about the requests or where we fall going into spring?
Just that the numbers for fall went up so drastically for fall and the spring numbers stayed the same. Is there anything to that, or is that just that's the way spring is and fall is going to be, this is kind of going to be where we are for fall, or we don't know?
I think it really does. And you'll see, the trend obviously was going up. And last year was more similar from fall to spring. This past fall that we're in right now had the largest number we've ever had. So, in terms of the total number of students, that hasn't gone up that dramatically. And while the courses taken has gone up, 23 courses taken, it's a lot, but also it was 15 courses in 2020, 2021. So, it's incrementally increasing. And the total number of students typically isn't going up, but students want to make sure they get something. So knowing that college timetables are uncontrollable, they apply for the same courses at 3 colleges, and they apply for multiple courses. So if you really love psychology, you're going to request everything you can take after that, from social psych to exercise, physiology, all the different things. So I think students just want to find something that works. And again, the total number of courses taken hasn't grown as, if you look at the requests, you're not seeing a 1-to-1 increase there. Mm-hmm. So, when you have 76 courses requested, 69 approved and 14 taken, that's, again, not going up when you have 110 courses approved, even though you'd think it would. It's just because kids want to find something that fits.
Got it. That makes sense. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? All right, I'm looking.
Just information tonight.
Oh, it's just information.
Information
We're
that in
talking
2
about it
weeks,
tomorrow night.
so-
Okay,
Take that.
we'll send our questions to you.
All right, thank you. Annual health report, Mr. Ekman, Ms. O'Neill, please.
Okay, thank you. Our school nursing and health services team plays a vital role in supporting the health and educational needs of our students. And our district nurse, Lori O'Neill, is here to give the health and nursing services report to the board.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me here tonight. I have the privilege of presenting our health and nursing services report from the 22-23 school year. I'm extremely grateful for the efforts of the entire health and nursing services team who made last year successful. While our role is to support all students in the district, as in past years, a great deal of our time is spent on an average school day supporting those students with chronic health conditions, such as diabetes, and those with new short-term diagnoses, such as concussions, injuries, or infections. Additionally, a passion area of mine continues to be emergency medical response and preparedness. In reviewing some of our most chronic health conditions, the number of conditions reported for students shows the highest volume with asthma and life-threatening allergies. But these student populations haven't often required the most significant support from nursing services on a daily basis to prevent missed class time. However, the volume of students in the district with a diagnosis of diabetes is the lowest chronic condition listed, yet often this student population requires frequent assessment and intervention from trained health services staff to ensure they are kept safe at school and that the amount of time out of the classroom is limited. Similarly, an increased focus of surveillance on head injuries and concussions from our nursing services team likely led to more accurate reporting of students diagnosed with concussions. Our team made significant efforts to communicate with students, families, and staff to ensure comprehensive care was in place to keep them on track for return to learning. We maintained 246 individualized health plans for students across all levels, which are used to communicate with school staff how to respond to and care for students with unique medical needs. Over half of those plans are for individuals with life-threatening allergies, and a number of health plans give specific directions on how to care for and respond to individuals having a medical emergency related to seizures or diabetes. Nursing services also supports a number of students at all levels with 504s and IEPs. On a daily basis, each of our building's health rooms are heavily utilized for injuries and to triage symptoms of illnesses. Those are split fairly evenly with students with chronic conditions and those with no significant health history. There were over 7,000 doses of medications administered last year and 14,000 health room visits across the district. I am tremendously proud of the work that we have done with emergency preparedness and the emergency response team development that has occurred in each building, and I'm extremely grateful for the dedicated staff members that comprise each team. During the 22-23 school year, all FPS buildings met the requirements for redesignation for the Heart Safe School program through Project Adam at Children's Wisconsin. As you can see, we have a variety of medical emergencies that occur in our buildings across the district each year. Our nursing services team is responsible for the training of the emergency response teams and to care for any individuals experiencing a potentially life-threatening event. We use this information to drive our efforts and work to continuously get better based on the events that may be more likely to occur. During the 22-23 school year, our ERTs were utilized 13 times. When needed, care was appropriately escalated by our ERTs for additional support, and the district placed a total of 7 911 calls to the Franklin Fire Department for emergency medical services. We are tremendously grateful for their partnership, support, and care. What questions do you guys have for me? Thank you.
Please, Angie.
I'm just always grateful for Nurse O'Neill's leadership, care, and professionalism. And if I had a medically fragile child that I was sending to school in Franklin, I can't imagine that I would feel any safer with anyone else in your position.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ann, please.
As I was reading through the report, what I kept coming back to was this idea of educators as first responders. And I don't think we often think about that. You know, we have teachers and we have firefighters, and those are different. But in so many ways, the people in our school buildings have to be first responders on a daily basis. And I look at everything that has been put into place thanks to your leadership and your service to our students, and just see that we have all of these safety plans and we have all of this training and people in every building who are ready to be, and I've seen it in action, they are ready to be first responders, and it's because of that leadership. And so I'm really proud that we as Franklin have such a dedicated nursing medical staff here in our district, and that we care so much, and you care so much and really take care of those students. I would echo what Angie says. I think, it must be terrifying. I don't know that feeling, but it must be terrifying to send your child with a medical condition to a building to be taken care of by other people. And all of these things in place, and talking to the people I know, I think people do feel very safe to have their students here in Franklin. So I'm really grateful to you for that.
Yeah, thank you. It's a privilege to work with many of these families, absolutely.
I do have one question. Towards the end of the report, you talked about being the district health and safety initiatives, and on the district safety committee, it just was the use of the past tense. It says school nurses were integral members of the district safety committee and were able to. Are you still members of that committee?
Yeah.
Okay.
My apologies.
I just wanted to make sure that
you
you didn't okay, we've met our goal, and now we don't need that anymore.
Yeah, no, not at all. We had a great safety committee meeting yesterday, so.
Okay. Just want to make sure that they weren't like,
Still
okay,
on the list.
good job, Laura, you're done now. You don't need to worry about safety anymore.
Yeah,
So.
no, not at all. Thanks.
Linda, please.
So do you still do like the eye exams and things like those basic things?
Yeah, we work with the Franklin Health Department, and they're great partners. And last year we conducted those in January and February, and we did kindergarten, second, and fourth grade, and then sent it out to the first, third, and fifth grade families. And if parents had any concerns about vision or hearing, we would screen those students, and also allowed teachers, if they had a concern about a student, we would check those students too.
And you're also involved with immunization compliance, or is that really the health department?
No, that is us as a school district by law. We are obligated to report that information.
You mentioned concussions. I was going to ask you about it. There was more reported, and is there more reported because there's more activity, or is it anomaly, or are we taking better care with concussions, which I think is fabulous?
Yeah, I think it's probably a combination of it. I think overall, in the community, there's more awareness of it. I think of our partners at Children's Wisconsin and their emphasis on, caring for head injuries. But definitely, we partner with the trainers at the high school, and Lauren Preba, our nursing services assistant, has been integral in kind of assisting with that communication, both with what's happening in each building and with families. So I think it's a more accurate number and probably a slight increase in diagnoses as well.
Linda, please.
Asthma changed dramatically, and you have a footnote that.
Yep.
But what was the change?
Yeah, so how registration works through InfoSnap, that question changed slightly, so the numbers were reported differently. So I've worked with our data integration specialist to see if we can kind of hone in on making sure we're asking that to ensure the numbers we have are the most accurate they can be.
So you think it's underreported? Is that what you suspect?
I think it may be slightly underreported, but I think it actually may be slightly more accurate than it used to be.
Okay.
Anyone else? All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Lori. Thank you.
Franklin Forward Elementary School Visioning, Mrs. Bennon, PRA people, Sheriff Packer.
Everybody else.
Yep, everybody, we have a
At
whole
all.
crew with us this evening.
Bombi and Imperiale.
So joining us at the table, we have Ms. Imperiale, Principal of Pleasant View, Ms. Bombi, Principal of Robinwood. They've also been working with the team of all of our elementary administrators. They were the representatives that came tonight to give voice to the vision that we're going to present. Mike Hacker, you've met before. He's with Cadence Consulting. And Nick Kent and Paige Steed are both with PRA, who we've also met before. So we're just going to kind of walk you through the presentation for this evening. So you have the presentation in front of you. As I kind of said in the opener this evening, you also have a binder for all of our Franklin Forward. I point that out again because it may be advantageous if you want to jump back and look at pieces of information we've gained through time. We've talked a little bit, mostly at the September 27th meeting, about the journey ahead of us and the learning along the way and how we're piecing that path forward. This is one of those pieces in it. So this evening, just kind of recapping where we've been. Coherence plan is what we ground ourselves in. It is what we are, who we are, and what we do for our learners and our staff every day. As we know, we're in the process of building out our next 3-year plan for 2024 through 2027. We'll continue to do that work, but that's really where we're grounded. And now we're talking about what does that look like in our facilities? How do we create the space to make that magic happen? September 27th, we debriefed our school tours. We established those guiding principles, those pieces that are really honing in on what are those things that we value in Franklin Public Schools and in our community and that we want to adhere to or tie to as we plan moving forward. You'll see those, especially the ones as they relate to elementary schools this evening in the presentation. The Gantt chart, the board engagements, this is a part of that process. And then also things that have happened between our time together on the 27th and now is that our team continues to meet on a biweekly basis with our crew that's with us this evening, with other administrators, to continue to look at and talk about what is our vision for our elementary schools. In a couple weeks, you'll hear what our vision is for high school, what that looks like. So those meetings are always taking place in between. So tonight, just to get us back grounded in our Gantt chart, Chad's really good with his animations.
I guess so.
All right, it's not as good as the green one I dropped in the slide deck. That wasn't good enough for him. But really, we were together last week for key communicators. We were working with a community group of nearly 60 people, talking about our coherence plan. And then we're a part of that big gold bar of the learning as we build forward. When we look at our engagements in our next slide, this is really a part of that animated gift again, right? He'll enjoy that. We all enjoy this, just so you know. But really, this is about the board learning aspect again. So we're all learning together. We learned in August with Andy Daniels and his team about what's the current state of our facilities, what does that look like for us over the next 10 years. Now we're in the other aspect of this of that looked at current facilities and what the needs are. Now we're talking about what's our vision for other areas of learning that we need those facilities to fulfill. So that's really our focus this evening. So we're going to talk about the model elementary school. So you're going to hear a lot about educational learning spaces, learning environments, suitability, that desired state that we're moving to or hoping to move to. We can hold the questions till the end. If there's something burning as we kind of go through slides, definitely get that out there if we can help create more learning behind that and more understanding. But really, it's leading us up to that December 13th workshop. So that opportunity where we're coming together, we'll have the learning from tonight, we'll have the learning from our high school visioning in a couple weeks, and we'll come together to start thinking about what does this look like, what do we want to do with all of this information. So tonight's not about presenting a solution, it's about bringing us back around what does that vision look like. So the guiding principles, this main guiding principle really guides all the work. You're going to see this often when we come together about what's driving our programming and that experience. Tonight, I'm also lining up a few questions that you'll probably want to grapple with through tonight, through our high school presentation, and really what will kind of guide our discussion on that December 13th meeting. So that first question on our next slide is really talking about, there we go, thank you. Is the existing capacity adequate to service the needs of the district today and in the future? And if not, what are those additional space need requirements? So what does that look like? That's one of the questions we'll maybe want to think about as we're listening and learning tonight and we're thinking forward or raising questions or future learning that really aligns to that guiding principle listed. Also, what facilities will be required to accommodate visionary programs? So you're going to hear a little bit about learning spaces that create opportunity for collaboration, for critical thinking, for inquiry. So what does that look like with our current spaces? Our next question we're going to look at.
I have a question. I know you got blue and red. Can you
Yep.
explain why I'm supposed to be paying attention to blue and red?
Oh yeah, good reminder. Thank you, Linda. So it's kind of tucked in the bottom of that gray box. So actually good to point out. So when we first did our presentations in September, we used green and gold. But if you're colorblind, those are colors that are hard to see. So this looks different. It's the same color coding, just different colors. Anything in red is language that's coming off of our coherence plan. So we were trying to be very deliberate about like, if our coherence plan is driving this, how are we building off of that? Anything in blue is off that profile of a grad. So if you think back to the presentation that Dr. Moe did with Principal Volo and Mr. Thompson, that's the language that came out of the profile of a grad, which you'll see really embedded in that next coherence plan as we start to build that for 24-27. So thank you. That's good. We're also going to look at another question to frame our learning tonight is about the deficiencies, building space deficiencies that should be addressed immediately. So when we're looking at what our needs are, what does that look like? Those align to the guiding principles. Really, when we were talking about things that were under the safety security aspect, or when we were talking about ADA needs, things along those lines. And then the final one, and this isn't really the question that we will look at so much tonight. This has been some of the learning from August and like our school tours is when we really talked about that approximate $96 million in building needs over the next 10 years. So that's just another question, right? We're gonna have to layer that in with this vision work when we come together in December. So that question's there to keep that in our mind also. Is that like three-legged stool piece that we've been using also? That's one of those pieces there that we're gonna wanna look at moving forward, but not necessarily the focus for this night when we talk about the work. Any questions about the questions or kind of the purpose of that? kind of guiding our thinking as we move through.
Yeah, I'm trying to get my head around some of this, and when I look at like the building deficiencies, you don't have, how do I distinguish these? Like 1, 2, 3, it might be the,
I think that's number
1,
3.
2, 3, 4, which is the building space deficiency, is that the fourth one?
Mm-hmm.
So, you have the blue and you have the red, and then we have the rest of the information. Where does that really come from? Because you're talking about creating outdoor play spaces, and it's kind of been my experience with the district over the years that playgrounds is what the PTA funded. It wasn't really part of master planning. So where does that come from?
Sure, that's
And also, I mean, you have the ADA compliance, secure entrances, which we've always paid attention to. So that's not new, correct?
Right.
But I do want to understand the play spaces, and that it's not something that we really, I mean, we obviously pay attention to it. All of our schools have wonderful playground equipment, but it's not something that the district as a whole, it wasn't a guiding principle. It was something that schools did.
Yeah, so playgrounds are definitely something that are an important part of social development for our students too, and there's a lot of ADA compliance pieces that come with it. Actually, through the presentation tonight and some of the pictures that are included, you'll see some of the reasons why ADA playgrounds and things like that might come up for age appropriateness, for safety, like we said, for the ADA pieces. Our playgrounds aren't fully funded, nor do we want them fully funded out of our PTOs or PTAs. They're extremely expensive. There are a lot of guidelines of things that we need. And it also can create discrepancies across our district depending on the strength or the fundraising abilities of certain schools against others. So really the guiding principle, it raises a really great question, Linda, because the idea of the guiding principles is that no matter which school your child goes to, their experience should be the same. And what you'll see in some of our pictures and what we have as a vision for playgrounds is that there are some schools that we have in our district, like you'll see Southwood Glen, not to steal the glory of the presentation tonight, but Southwood Glen has a great early childhood play space, right? It has fencing for safety, it has green space, it has hard space, it has playground equipment. Even that playground equipment isn't perfect for the size of the young beings on it, but it's usable and safe, and that's something that isn't replicated at every school. So what is it that we want for the students, and that's best for them? But yeah, we've moved beyond the phase of having that be something that's just coming out of PTOs or PTAs.
But really, the history of that, though, is that school was built because that's where early childhood education was housed. It wasn't housed in every single building. It was built for that purpose.
Right. I think a lot of like the strength of the conversation tonight is that we have a lot of good things going on in our schools, and we have areas to continue to improve in vision, and learning has changed and will continue to change. So really a lot of what we're laying over tonight with visioning is there's some needs, like when we looked at facility with Andy Daniels on the team, that was more the needs of the building. Now we're looking at like, what is that vision for learning moving forward? And that's why it's grounded in coherence plan, because it has changed. Like we have more 4K students than we had, right? 4K is relatively new to our district. So we have some vision there to how we can even continue to grow in that area. And also, what does the learning space need to look like to meet the needs of learning today versus when maybe some of our buildings are built? Southwood Glen being a newer one, but some of our other buildings older, and like, what does that look like? So that's part of the importance of the work tonight, envisioning that out and what learning looks like. So to reintroduce a few people in the room. So Nick Kent and Paige are gonna walk through some of the beginning of the visioning, how we looked at our facilities that we have and started to think about, you know, what's there, what we wanna continue to think about as we dream forward for learning and what that vision is. And Mike Hacker also adding into that. As they walk through things, like I had said, Janine and Ashley are here, our principals from elementaries, to bring voice to what that looks like for the students in the classroom and in their schools and in the other schools, are the voice of all 5 of our elementary principals tonight and what that looks like. So I'll hand it over.
Which buildings are you from?
I'm at Pleasant View.
Ravenwood.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, let's dive in to some of the visioning that we've done. So previously, you have seen, as has been mentioned before, the maintenance study that Mr. Daniels has presented, and that was really, again, looking at, if nothing else changed in the district, what are those things that we would have to be keeping an eye on and addressing just to maintain our buildings over time. I believe you've also seen the data from MD Roffers looking at the quantitative analysis of how many students we can expect to need to serve in each one of these buildings moving on into the future. So tonight what we really want to focus on is the qualitative aspects of the elementary schools in particular. So when we think about the portfolio of buildings across the district, the elementary schools are kind of a unique challenge for us. When we think about what was done with the middle school, there was a vision put to that, but there's one middle school in the district. When we meet again, next time we'll talk about the high school. There's one high school, so we create one vision for one building. We have 5 elementary schools currently in the district, and each of those buildings was built at a different time and marks a different point in the development of educational delivery within the community. So as we think about how do we start to bring some level of commonality amongst those 5 buildings, bring them all up to a relatively similar level of serviceability within the community, and potentially what is even a new facility, if and when that's needed in the district, look like? So how do we create the opportunity for every student, regardless of where they live within the district, have access to the same types of learning facilities, the same types of opportunities? So again, with a multitude of facilities, that presents a little bit of a different challenge than when we're talking about the middle school or high school. So a tool that we will often use is what we call the model school. And the intent of creating the model school is to take a step back from current state, which we've been looking at so much thus far, and say, if we were going to create the right tool to serve the community here in Franklin for the future at the elementary levels, what does that tool look like? What do we want it to be able to do for our teachers? What do we want the experience for our kids and our families to be like here in Franklin? And we create that model. And that model is, in our world, it's what we call a space program. So it's a list of all the parts and pieces and things that might go into it. When we work with our partners on the education side, we're thinking about the functionality of those spaces. Like how does their world, all the things that they're trying to do in that space, that they need to do in that space, how do we support them? Do we have the right types of functional pieces within that? We then take that model, and that is also a quantitative analysis. So there are relative areas associated with it, number of spaces, sizes of spaces, amenities within those spaces. And we use that tool to benchmark where our current facilities are or are not, and how close they are or are not to meeting all the things that we need them to be able to do to serve the community into the future. And as we do that analysis, we start to shake out where some of those deltas might be. And as we'll see here in a minute, it's not the same as you go from building to building, which is probably something you would expect, again, with buildings being built over many decades within the district. So I'm going to turn it over to Paige to kind of take us through what that actually looks like in reality with our 5 elementary schools.
Yeah, so if you go to the next slide, so this is what came out of that initial analysis. So as Nick stated, from the space program, we went building by building, and up there, as you can see, they're ordered by most recent school on the left, Ben Franklin, to the oldest school that was built, which was Countrydale. So from this analysis, we kind of put it into 5 categories, whether it meets the model elementary school need, whether it exceeds it, so if it's larger than what we're saying is a inappropriate space. If it's smaller or adequate, the lighter green, it's smaller than what's in our program, but it still functions appropriately. And then the orange shows inadequate spaces, so that are significantly smaller than what was identified as an appropriate space. And then in the red, that's just that room does not exist at the current school. So as you can see from this list, it's kind of all over the board. There's a couple spaces that are kind of throughout all the schools, but in general, a lot of the spaces are provided at some and not others. So from here, we took that, and if you go to the next slide, we condensed that into a more simplified chart. So this is, if you're considering 100% of the space that's in that model program, how much of the space is not there, how much of the space is inadequate, and then generally the green, how much is functioning appropriately. So a couple things to note here too is to keep in mind that this is size of space. So some of the schools, like specifically Southwood Glen and Pleasant View, that are missing cafeteria space dedicated. The red looks a little larger than you'd expect, but some other ones, it's more so more little spaces are missing. So we translated that now into the actual floor plan of the buildings to see if we could identify some key areas of the building that could use some work. So as you can see, this is an overall analysis, and we'll get into each building more specifically later. But it just graphically shows how the schools are in comparison.
Can I
just
ask a question or no?
Sure, go ahead, Linda.
So when I look at the previous chart, this one,
Yeah.
I don't really see any red on the next chart.
Because that means red is not there.
Exactly. Red does not exist on those buildings.
Yeah, so really when you're looking at the chart, you kind of have to consider the red missing a little bit for how the schools are functioning currently. And then the red is kind of on top of that, what additional needs are not being met.
Yeah. So this is, we've wrestled with this too. There's a lot of information, right? So we're trying to simplify this down in line item by line item. When you look at these charts, and I hope as we go through this, it becomes a little bit more clear. What we're trying to extrapolate from this information is what magnitude of need do we have within these buildings, right? And ultimately, we want to start to look at, and this is a little bit further down the line in this process, but we want to start to look at the information that was presented previously on maintenance needs within each one of these buildings, and then also consider how these spaces function. And when we put those two together, we can start to look at some different options. You know, what makes sense financially, what makes sense functionally for the district to start to address some of these needs over time. So those red spaces that are missing, as we start to develop potential solutions later on in this process, we'll start to see those things that are today red start to populate in these solutions as we kind of wrestle with how do we bring that commonality amongst our 5 elementary schools.
Yeah, so some of the common deficiencies we saw from doing this analysis, and this is relating back to the model elementary, what we listed up there. So obviously in our model elementary school, we have all of the standard, core curriculum classrooms that are currently there. These are the things that are commonly in the red zone or in the orange. So 4K, 5K is a big one, just having appropriate child size bathrooms attached to the rooms, having the correct storage for the rooms, again, having cubby space for the children in the rooms, having adequate size for the younger kids. Collaboration in breakout rooms, kind of also connected with small group instruction and intervention spaces. So some of the schools, some of the more recent schools like Ben Franklin and Southwood Glen, sorry, stumbling over my words. They do have some of the collaboration incorporated, some breakout spaces that you can pull students if you need just a couple students to work on their own or with someone who's coming to pull them out. Special education spaces, just making sure that currently there are special education spaces, but not all of it. All of them are adequate for the needs of the students. Staff wellness is another one, ensuring there's enough collaboration for staff and secure staff areas. Community functions, dedicated cafeterias and gymnasiums, And then also the outdoor spaces like the traffic flow, the bus parking, pickup and parent drop-off, having dedicated and safe spaces for those.
And sorry, just before we turn over to our principals to talk for a minute, I probably neglected to mention when we built this model, this was not just built by us as architects. While we do spend quite a bit of time in schools, I always like to keep ourselves grounded in the fact that none of us, well, Paige and I, we're not teachers. We hang out with a lot of teachers, but we're not teachers. So critical to this work is hearing the voice of the admin team, but also hearing from the building level, for those who live these environments every day. What are those proper spaces? So their voice is embodied in that model that we created, and that's really what we wanted. We asked them to come share from their day-to-day experiences how these spaces that are reflected in the model actually work and why they are needed.
So you're gonna see a series of slides here that have side-by-side pictures, current pictures of our current spaces, and then on the right side, desired pictures. So some of those desired pictures are current spaces in our district. So highlighting, right, like it's not like there's a problem with everything. Like we have a lot of positive spaces. So trying to capture some of those and then perhaps talk about consistency though, right? So consistency from in all 5 buildings. And then other pictures in that desired state may be of other local schools that have that more desired space we're looking for, if that makes sense. I think before we look at all of them too, one thing that's really important to capture is we're talking about spaces and buildings, but we know that the people create the environment, and the teachers and the educators are the most important piece of all this. So really framing your mind around, like, for them to be the best at their job, we have to give them the tools to do that. And many of the skills that we expect our students to leave Franklin Public Schools with to go out into the work environment or to college have really changed in the last 25 years. So really thinking about how we're giving our educators and our students those spaces to be able to practice and develop those skills and match that. And just kind of thinking about through that lens as well.
I think we do a great job with our new middle school and the newer spaces at the high school. Those environments set those kids up for success once they leave Franklin Public Schools, but yet we get them at 4 when we're still potty training them. And so thinking about how much more success we could have with the spaces that are similar to the ones that they get at the middle and the high school. So just kind of keeping all of that in mind when we're going through will help kind of give us that lens for what kind of tools do our kiddos deserve in Franklin Public Schools. All right, so here we just have our general classrooms, and from the tours that I know that you all participated in, seeing some of our littlest bodies to our biggest bodies in some potentially small settings, it's not conducive to that collaborative learning. Multiple tables can be pushed together. However, then the loudness of the group work gets to be distracting for individuals. So on the desired side state, there are multiple spaces, the clear windows, the doors, much like the middle school, where we can have breakout spaces that are much larger than that typical classroom, kind of help promote that collaborative space. So current state of these spaces outside of the general ed classroom, the 2 pictures, one is Ben Franklin on the top and bottom is Robinwood. So we get creative with removing groups and having them be collaborative independently out in the hallways with still supervision of the classroom and such. However, again, there's 6 classrooms, there's lots of doorways, lots of traffic in those current states. So the distractibility, the access to potentially outlets to charge a Chromebook maybe, or to record a video for a project, very limited. So then the desired spaces on the right, the top yellow one, I believe, is the high school. Sorry, I can't see, and I keep looking. I'm not sure which screen to look at right now. But yeah, so the desired state, we do have current state ones, the middle schools, and the far right one as well. So that flexible seating, different options for students, We are using lunch tables currently to have another space other than the floor. So really looking at the tools there that support that collaborative conversation, which we know kids learn best from each other. Teachers can teach and speak to points, but through that, that collaboration, that's when the authentic learning occurs.
This next slide shows just the arts, some of those encore spaces. I think like a big thing that comes into play with some of these spaces is even just like storage and having, like if you see in the bottom left-hand corner on the current state, I can just speak to that one because that's at Pleasant View. You'll see a lot of instruments in the back. We have all these wonderful tools that kids get to use, but we also talk to teachers about setting up environments that do set kids up for success. So when we have kids that maybe struggle keeping their hands to themselves or being safe, right? And then we have lots of distractions within the room that we have no place to put items away safely, that we've invested a lot of money in. But also just looking, I think in the past slides and even here, like there's also some timeless elements that we can think about, like when we talk about wellness for students or some of even the things that Lori O'Neill talked about in the nursing, like natural light, like those are timeless. That doesn't matter what our programming is, but like supporting an environment that's inviting and welcoming, which you can just kind of see the differences in some of those slides from space to space. These are pictures of special education, what we call sensory rooms or places for students when they do need a break to de-escalate in a more private setting that's keeps their dignity away from students and just kind of has some privacy. You can see pictures on the left of, I think in many buildings, they're makeshift spaces of whatever we've had left versus the right where there's some intentionality around tools and placement, lighting, just I think getting back to that highlight of intentionality and like what do we need kids to get out of those spaces. If we're thinking about de-escalation, I know like at Robinwood, that space is like right in the front where any visitor can see, which isn't really a great feeling for those students that need that privacy and that work with the staff when all of your visitors are kind of being paraded right by that.
The model school too, having these spaces not just in one location, spread out among all of the educational spaces, because again, we want students to be in class learning. And so the faster, right, the less steps we take to get to a room that's going to support their needs, the more time they're in the classroom. And so that was a big takeaway, that we don't need just one. Everyone can use a break, me included, right? So as adults, we take breaks. We're just teaching students how to do it appropriately.
And then these community spaces, so we talk about cafeteria and gyms, some of those shared spaces. I think, again, that comes down to like, you can see the visible difference, but I think highlighting on the left side, like we do have a lot of spaces that our kids within a building are even getting a different experience in their Phy Ed class when perhaps one grade, some of the lower grades are getting half of a gym while lunch is being run on the other side. Versus, you know, maybe a different first grade is getting the entire gym, and just what a different experience that is when it comes down to safety and even an enjoyability for students in that class at an early age. We're dictating some of that by just the physical space. I think also these spaces provide a lot of opportunity then for like clubs, after school things, and oftentimes we're limited by that when we have a kids club operating out of that and no other space to kind of encourage some of those other activities that we do know there's a desire, but we are lacking in a community-based space to utilize that within our building. And so again, here's some gyms, kind of the same concept with the cafeteria, just another look at it though.
And to the bottom right-hand picture, that is a school, and that very back piece under, I think it says McKinley, thank you. Definitely not reading that. That's a stage, and it opens up, and then it opens up to the other side, which is then a common space. So thinking about, some of our schools have stages, Southwood Glen has a stage, thinking about developmentally appropriate, putting a 4-year-old up on that lifted stage, not the safest thing. So thinking about how we can have a space that supports the arts and the performances within the school building, and or if we're having visitors come to showcase orchestra for our 5th graders before they get to 6th grade, like having a formal space to do that, but then also having it be utilized for that purpose of connecting those 2 rooms. Now you have a bigger community space for family events and or any PTO event really that they're working out of.
These are some images of just varying library spaces. I think many of them have had updates to them and whatnot, but again, that whole consistency piece. I think that middle one is at Southwood Glen with that natural light. Again, so just some of those varying features and just trying to get those consistent experiences for our students.
So these are our front office spaces. So on the desired side, Pleasant View, the first 2 top ones. So beautiful space, natural light, very welcoming. And so when you walk in, you feel that, right? You feel the light, you see the secretaries, they all have an amount of space that's allowable for them to be on the phone, but yet the other person next to them that's sharing that long desk is talking to a student, and it's not distracting. The bottom picture on the current state is Robinwood, and so the 2 secretaries sit in front, and then one sits at her own desk, so not even within the same kind of space, very tightly formed, I guess, to say the least. The top right one, I was gonna say, I can't even, yeah, that's Southwood Glen, and then the left one is Countrydale. So just tight quarters. That's your first glimpse of walking in, wanting to feel that welcome. The staff welcome families in, but the space, the tools itself, what type of snapshot are families getting during that first walk-in? Good old hallways. So storage, again, with elementary and the tools and the manipulatives, but then also just kids' stuff. We live in Wisconsin, so we've got lots of stuff and during the winter months and potentially into March and April. So you don't know how long the timeline lasts for boots, snow pants, gloves, hats, and all of that. The desired state, the top right one, with the natural light, the common space of lockers, but then also like the lockers are free on top. So visibility, storage capabilities, things aren't on the floor. At Robinwood, kids keep their boots and potentially snow pants under, or their lockers hanging open so that their pants can dry, things of that nature. The top right on the current state is the Southwood Glen hallway. So it is a wider hallway than maybe the one pictured to the left at Countrydale, but yet that wide hallway is being consumed for storage purposes. So that storage does not occur in the classroom, so they makeshift it out in the hallway with bins, because teachers are resourceful that way and organized.
And then we have some aerial views of just when we think about pickup and drop off, and I'm sure you've all been a part of a wonderful car line at some point. Just being really mindful of like what those impacts have on our community. Like I know I've taken calls from the person that's angry waiting on 51st Street when our car line is blocking traffic for 30 minutes, or the new neighbor who didn't realize their driveway exits into Marquette Avenue, right? So just those little things. I know we can't solve all of that, and some of that's awareness of where your household is, but I think just when we're looking at overall space, how is that safe? I've seen some really close calls with buses and cars competing for areas, and so just what does that mean for our students? I also think oftentimes about our kids that we release on bikes or walking, and we don't always have sidewalks, so how are we setting up those drop-off areas that we are intentional about creating the most safe environment, getting kids in and out of school?
Yeah, Robinwood specifically this year, we've changed our logistic for pickup and drop off twice this year, just to ensure the safety of the concerns that were brought to my attention over the summer. So our neighbors are very kind to borrow their space, especially in garbage and mail delivery, pickup time, all of those fun things, and then in the winter. So we're part of the community, and we want to be respectful, and we can send out so many messages and supervise, but if we can limit the amount of space that we're borrowing during those times, if we can reorganize it, that is the desired state.
And then lastly, you'll see the outdoor play spaces as Annalie alluded to or stated earlier, right? Like thinking about how this is a big piece of students' social development and a big piece of their day. And so you'll see on the right side, like some of those desired states with just the green space that's accessible to all kids versus some of the spaces on the left that are, like I look at wood chips. We have some beautiful play spaces at Pleasant View, but when you have to go up several feet and then onto wood chips, we totally eliminate the accessibility for students in wheelchairs and with other physical restraints. So being mindful of not just the play space and what it looks like, but also the accessibility to getting it. Also just the size of it, like monkey bars that I can use as a 6-foot person aren't great for our 4Kers, right? It really limits their use and it's not developing them socially and then that just leads to other, right? They're not getting those same experiences as their peers who have the one on the right. So
The middle current state playground is Robinwood, and we've currently solved it's a temporary solution for setting boundaries. So our smallest learners, potentially with some of our highest needs, play and explore their environment in that space. And we had to put up a snow fence because if anyone knows if a child is in 4K or 5K functioning as a 3-year-old, any 3-year-old loves to run in any open space. And so in between the playground trees is a big wide open space. And so they're not intentionally being naughty. They're not trying to push boundaries. They just are exploring the world that they know is so new to them. And so it really stunts their development when we are constraining them bombarding them with our bodies or saying no, stop, we're making it a negative experience when it should be the most positive one of their day. And so I just think that Southwood Glen, though the playground is potentially a little bit larger for the smaller ones, they still have that freedom to run in a safe environment. And so just if I'm a student at Southwood Glen, I get that, but because I'm at Robinwood or other elementary schools, my child may not. And so just thinking about that equitable experience across all of our elementaries is something that I know our elementary team really talks through and wants to provide families to the best of our ability.
So these are good examples of the conversations that we've been having over the last several months as we've worked up to this point. And when I say that our model elementary school is rooted in these conversations, it truly is. This is a reflection of the desired state of the Franklin Public Schools. And what we're about to share here, we're going to look briefly at each one of the individual schools. We're not going to spend a lot of time on them. What we've created is in essence a little dashboard for each one of our elementary schools. That as we go forward in this process and we start to think about what might we consider doing to these spaces, we wanted to kind of aggregate some of this information in one place. So we'll kind of walk through this on a building by building basis.
Yeah, so starting looking at Ben Franklin, again, the most currently built school. In general, there's a lot of green. It's functioning pretty well. There's not a ton of missing spaces. It starts to pinpoint some key areas, specifically kindergarten spaces. So there's 3 that do have that connection to the toilet room and storage. But then if we're looking at potentially more full day programming, there's a couple that are deficient in that area. And also the commons and gym spaces are undersized. And then another thing you'll see on these charts is the enrollment. Again, we've shown this at multiple meetings now. So this is just showing the history of the past 10 years and then the projected future up to 2040. So again, enrollment relatively steady, staying right under that target capacity line.
Similarly, over at Southwood Glen, we're looking pretty good. Quite a bit of green over at this building. One of the key pieces that we're missing is a dedicated student commons, that eating space in this building. And we saw an image earlier of the library space. It's still good. It's still a great space with daylight in it. I mentioned earlier in one of our internal meetings, maybe the finished palette isn't exactly what we would pick today, but overall, this is still a good building. So I think there is, as we keep reiterating, there is a lot of good here in the elementary schools, and Southwood Glen is a prime example of that.
Then we get to Robinwood. So in this one, you'll start to see a lot more of that orange color, specifically in the general ed classrooms. So this is kind of an important distinguisher because, you know, this is where kids are spending most of their day. In this case, the classrooms are odd shapes. They are undersized, and right now they have exits out to each classroom, which is a safety concern. And then the gym is also undersized. And then another thing that we haven't really touched on much is the outdoor spaces. So this is one where there's not a separate bus versus parent pickup lane, so they're kind of in the same area.
Quick question. So how much are they undersized?
What kind of transitions it into orange is about a 10% undersized at least.
10%?
Yeah.
That's the kind of the cutoff where the color changes. So it could be a little bit under. I'd have to look at the specific numbers.
Pleasant View is a little bit of a split decision. Again, a lot of green on this building, but we have some areas of yellow, primarily our public spaces. So our gym is a bit small, and here too we do not have our dedicated student commons. Also, the kindergarten classrooms are really smaller than what we would like to see. And that's kind of a common element, right? All of these buildings were built at a time before 4K, so many of these functions are happening in rooms that weren't designed for a function that didn't exist when the buildings were built.
And then the one we've talked about many times, Countrydale. So again, the oldest building in the district. There's a lot of orange, so a lot of the rooms are undersized and specifically missing a lot of the collaboration spaces. In general, kindergarten is another big one on this one, and specifically outside the safety of traffic flow and getting to the school has even been brought up by the city to us.
So just to kind of bring this back into summary, we saw this graphic earlier. These are our 5 buildings all laid out together so you can start to see them in comparison. Again, just where we have higher concentrations of undersized spaces. And as we said earlier, the reds don't exist. So we have to look at potentially where do we want to address some of those red spaces. If we flip to our next slide, we saw this one too. So really when we start to look at this simplified, two buildings start to stand out a little bit more than others, right? We have Robinwood and we have Countrydale that have a higher proportion of their spaces that should be looked at. Doesn't mean we have to do things to those spaces, but these are areas where we look at them qualitatively, they raise flags to us. It's something we should be looking at. And a note on the red too. It's interesting. There's variation, but they're kind of similar from building to building. So why is that? Well, many of those functions that comprise the red are things that just weren't common practice when all 5 of these buildings were built. Things like we looked at earlier, things like special education suites, 4K classrooms that we talked about, some of the more collaborative open learning spaces that just wasn't part of the vernacular when these buildings were built. And it's not unique to Franklin. It's a result of the age of the buildings and when they were created. So those are conversations that we'll have as we go forward, envisioning what we might want to consider with all these buildings. So we kind of offer this information again, we're layering up on our base knowledge before we start to try to create solutions or propose solutions to some of these challenges.
Angie, please.
Back to slide 36. I believe it does. Does the magnitude of educational suitability needs align with the dollar amounts, the price tags for
the maintenance?
Correct.
Coincidentally, yes.
All right.
They're two different data sets, but yes.
And then on slide 12, you briefly addressed this, but can you talk a little bit more about how what has been identified as the ideal school for Franklin may be similar or different to, I mean, you could have just taken a universally ideal elementary school. So I'm just curious if there were any trends or things that were particularly unique to what was delineated by our leaders.
Yeah, I would say overall, the vision that we came to is somewhat universal, but there are a few things that do stand out. There is, I think, a greater focus on community spaces. Those are the gymnasiums and the cafeterias, kind of large group spaces, than we would see in some other places. And I think part of that is driven by the sheer demand. We spent a lot of time talking about just demand and scheduling for these kind of community-based spaces. I think we've also paid a little bit more, or put a little bit more attention on some of the collaborative and flexible spaces within the building. This may be driven by the example that we already have in the district of the middle school and kind of reflecting on what the experiences of these students in elementary school might be when they make that next step into the middle school, and kind of thinking about how the model elementary might start to get them acclimated to that type of learning when they make that step across the street over to the middle school.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would also add, there's also been an emphasis on staff retention and making sure staff have the appropriate professional spaces as well.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. Angie, you mentioned that slide, what slide was it, 36?
The bar chart?
And your question was, does it connect to the 96 million? And your answer was yes, but you said it was
Coincidence.
coincidental. Because there is no direct tie to
No,
this.
no. So these are two completely different data sets, right? The maintenance that Mr. Daniels presented is just looking at current state. This is looking at spaces that are undersized or not present at all. So two totally different things.
So you could have an older building that does meet things. 'cause it's
Absolutely.
well-maintained.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank
Well,
you.
it wouldn't just be because it's well-maintained, right? Because that was the end of the comment. You could have an older building that meets your desired state because it was built with,
Yes.
yeah, forward-thinking, whatever.
Or it was remodeled and added on
Correct.
to.
Yep.
Which we had a lot of, these buildings have undergone a lot of additions and
Yes.
changes. Thank you.
How far are we from having all our buildings be ADA compliant?
I would say the common things for that are bathrooms. I would say probably at least 3 or 4 of the schools have at least 1 or 2 bathrooms. I know some of the schools it's multiple, like most of them.
That are not ADA compliant?
That are not ADA compliant to today's standards. When they were built, they obviously were. But with, turning clearances and everything like that, they are not currently, if we built it today. In general, other than that, there's nothing hugely out there. Again, playgrounds, none of the playgrounds right now are ADA compliant. One of the examples of the desired school is that entire play set is ADA compliant, so someone with a wheelchair could make it all the way up to the top level.
And if there was a teacher in a wheelchair, which I know I think at the high school there are, is it the same, construction for a teacher to be able to access things as a student?
Yes.
One last question. The 96 million, which is projected for the 10 years, does it take into account the inflation, or is it 96 million as of today's data, right?
That's today's
Today's
dollars.
data.
Yes.
So if we adjust for the inflation possible, what amount? Are you thinking of 150 million, or it's more than that, or?
It's hard to say.
How, if we inflate it out 10 years? It's anybody's guess. So right now, in fact, we just saw some construction inflation data earlier today. So an estimate that I saw from a large construction management firm in Milwaukee said in 2024, we're still looking at about 10% inflation in the construction sector. So going out beyond that, prior to this current inflationary cycle that we're in, we would say 3% annually was probably reasonable. Going forward, we as architects have been projecting at least 5% annually. But right now, it's anybody's guess in the world that we are in. If you had anything to add to that, Mike?
No, and just keep in mind that's compounding, right? So that's 3 to 5% on top of each other every year, right? Into that 10-year projection. And again, just to reiterate that $90+ million, that's separate from this analysis, right? So when we talk about the needs here, what might translate into renovation of academic space or maybe new construction, that's not accounted for. Not to say that if you came in and renovated a space, you wouldn't also update the lights or replace the carpet. So that would be taken into account in the next layer of analysis. But just wanted to be clear as a couple of questions have come up on that topic that that's not rooted directly in this data tonight.
No, the reason I was asking is that, of course, we have this vision, and this maintenance, is it, it's like a car, you have a car and you want to maintain it. Does it come a point where it's better to sell the car and buy a new one, So like rather than investing in a old car, keeping oil changes and tire changes, is it better that, hey, just, that was my thought process.
Sure. And I would say we will likely have that conversation as we go further on this process. And that is the exact conversation that happened with the middle school, right? We had to explore in a one building scenario, what does a renovation and maintenance project look like relative to the cost of building brand new?
Thank you.
No, please.
I know this is the elementary school visioning, and I wanted to bring up that, and you do show each school in terms of the projected enrollment. And obviously there's issues with Countrydale in terms of going over, and we have underutilization of Ben Franklin at this time. So wouldn't it be, as a first line of action, wouldn't we pursue that first to balance the use of our buildings? Would that be a prudent thing to do as opposed to just plodding along here with something, a bigger approach when we can look and see clearly that Countrydale has too many kids? Ben Franklin, we have empty classrooms. Why wouldn't that be kind of our first thing to pursue?
That is an option that the district could consider.
It's still on the table.
And at what point are we going to really talk about that, I guess?
I would say the December 13th workshop is going to be the really big opportunity to do that. Because we'll learn a little bit in 2 weeks about, similar to tonight, but like Nick said, we have one high school, but what are the things that we're hoping to gain in our vision in that building? Then you kind of bring all that together and we talk about, like, so we have some enrollment pieces, right? That three-legged stool. We have some facility needs that we've identified over the next 10 years. And then we have this vision of what we want our elementary school to be leading into the middle school we built and leading out to the high school. What is that looking like? So those are the three pieces that we're going to have to grapple with. Some of these questions will help guide our thinking in that way, but one of those could be, right? Do you look at redistricting and does that get us, how much time does that get us? And what does that look like then with the buildings that do exist, right? That's the complexity of that conversation.
I would just add, we're not in the solution process yet. As you've seen, there's been no solutions brought forth. It's really the investigative period of time that we're in.
And what's the three-legged stool? Maybe I missed that one.
I think it's, when I look at it and I've thought about this, the complexity of this work, like we have three different major things going on. We have enrollment that's growing in our community and in certain pockets, like you've identified Countrydale, but maybe it's not growing as much near other schools. So somehow we have to look at that. That's a real thing. We have facility needs in the $90 million zone over the next 10 years. So we have to think about the approach to that when we know our district budget wouldn't cover that much the way it lands or the way we use it right now. And then the third piece being, what is the vision that we have? Like learning has changed and education has changed since even our latest building was built 25-ish years ago. So what are the spaces we have and what are some areas we could look at there? So those are the three pieces that I think about on that three-legged stool: enrollment, current needs of facilities and that vision for what we want learning to be as education and learning has changed.
I think we know that Countrydale is not going to be big enough in the fairly near future. I think the question for other board members is, do we think as a consensus that redistricting, establishing district boundaries for elementary schools is a single way to get out of this problem in the next 5 years? Because that question was asked, and my idea is that it can't. But maybe other members have different opinions.
I mean, I would lean into the fact that we are not at we are in the information gathering stage, and we shouldn't put or take anything off the table at this point. But everything I'm learning suggests to me that this is a complex problem that's not going to be solved for any amount of long-term gain with a simple solution.
Yeah, I think that's the whole goal of this process, right? Is that you've hired a team of experts that are really looking at a comprehensive view, right? Making sure we're looking around every corner, flipping over every rock, trying to project out with the best data available, right? Enrollment projections, that's hard. That's why you hired an expert to come in and say, based on all of this critical information, not just the district as a whole, but specific pockets of the district, what are they going to look like? So as we start to weigh out, as was just asked really aptly, at what point of reinvestment in an existing building is it counterproductive to not consider a new building, right? Especially if that new building is a strategy to consider solving for an enrollment challenge in a different part of the district, right? All of those scenarios, I think the hope is that we have our arms around all the needs from all those angles, so you as a board have as many options in front of you to consider. And as Nick noted, even a do-nothing option is on the table, right? Do nothing meaning don't change the configuration or maybe just shift boundaries. Certainly is a path, but I think apt for the group to have an expectation that all of the scenarios are brought forth and that everything has been studied as a part of this comprehensive view. And I think that's the goal as we go forward.
I agree. Please.
So I guess at this point, we're learning how has education changed, right? This is what this is about. What has changed? And when I look at it, what you've told me then, collaborative spaces, even though we have spaces, they're not quite the way we want them to be. Maybe there's furniture we could add that might solve that. We have some of the special education needs, which are smaller rooms, more specialized rooms. Community support spaces. However, the broader picture though is we have this new building supposedly we're approving. There's that's a broader question, to your point. We'll see that with the middle school but it's not just the elementary schools that address that. So I don't know if that's really new or if you're just saying you're seeing more demand, but I don't see it as new. We've always utilized our schools, the gym spaces for those kind of things. And then we have administration and staff support. I guess when I think about what's new here, there's obviously more technology. We have security issues. We've remodeled many of our buildings as far as the front door, so we have not ignored that. I don't see a lot of different things going on there. I see hallways as an issue when I'm not sure, there's always going to be a bigger hallway, but I'm not clear on how different that is from years ago. And drop-offs, there's obviously can be better, but Franklin doesn't have sidewalks. We don't get to decide that. The sheriff decides. We're going to have bus routes, and parents decide they want to bring their kids. So there's other factors involved. And then playgrounds. We've always had playgrounds. I don't know why it's a new issue at this point. So when I look at this visioning, I don't see a lot of classroom-based needs, is what I'm saying. So I'm just This is what I'm seeing right now. So it's not real compelling to me for us to kind of keep going, imagining something really, really different. We have a lot of good buildings in the district. We've maintained them and we've updated them as things happened. And that's what I want to say. Thank you.
I guess I just defer to the teachers, as you already have done, and what you are saying you need, to maximize student potential, to maximize student learning. So I guess if you say we need a different configuration of a hallway, I'm going to take your expertise as somebody who's on the front lines, saying this is what we need. The other thing I'm thinking of, along with changing education, is just changing, like, how do we heat our buildings? How, there's all kinds of things that are, I'm sure, could be more efficient, more future thinking, that could save money. Again, not building a new building, but just retrofitting, with things that make more sense in the 22nd century, for our group in 50 years.
Yeah, you're correct. And part of the reason why we want to look at these, we'll use the analogy, the three-legged stool, is when you start to address one of those legs, it may be an opportunity to look at another one of those pieces, right? So they all want to work together. So oftentimes, when we start to look at, let's just say, I'll just call it the simple, but it's not really simple. Look at the maintenance. And okay, let's just say $96 million appeared today. And I say, great, let's take care of all of our maintenance needs that were identified. Some of those projects, when you start to address them, when you start to replace, say, mechanical systems in larger scales, to do that, it starts to require us to open up walls and start to change things. So that then presents us with a question. Do we put the wall back the way it was designed in 1956, say, at Countrydale? Or is that an opportunity for us to think about, well, we have to build a wall. Do we want to put it somewhere else? And then we start to think about what we just looked at tonight. Okay, maybe the classrooms are a little bit smaller than what we would like. Now we can have an opportunity to address that while we're addressing maintenance. So it is complicated, and these things do start to weave together, particularly when we get into buildings that have higher levels of maintenance needs and more significant projects. We could very well come to the decision that we like the way our classrooms are organized, and we're going to keep them the way they are. That's something to consider, and that's something that we'll start to explore a little bit deeper as we go into the solutions phase. What does it mean to pull on a rope at this end? What happens at the other end?
Can I add something in about the educational piece? So to your point, I don't know that playgrounds have changed or learning, but when you look at some of the curriculum and what's the standards that we're asking students to meet, like, that's what's changed. So thinking about the middle school just had a great presentation there with that visual of, from like tier 1 is where we want universally to meet all students' needs. But 25 years ago, if there was a child that we needed to accelerate, we sent them to a different space with a different teacher and expected them to do that. And now we're looking at how do we, as like all those stakeholders sitting at that table, collaborate and work. And then flexibly, like if I have 3 fifth grade teachers, how are we collaborating and talking and saying, you know what, yep, we each have 2 kids that could be doing this together. How do we flexibly group them amongst us and work on that? But when you're sending kids in the hallway and not supervised, because we don't have spaces where you can visibly see or give them that distraction-free area to work on it, like that's some of the stuff that has changed. Or when we think about we're trying to put more STEM education into science, those require materials, space, setup, and that's just not feasible when you're trying to do that with 30 kids in a smaller, tight classroom or have those conversations.
And then,
Go ahead, Ann.
sorry, I just want to tag on to that, the equity piece of it too. Like, you might have the classroom space at, say, Ben Franklin to do a really great STEM activity that's in the curriculum. You might not have that space at Countrydale. So now these kids get to 6th grade at Forest Park, and the teacher says, okay, so I know what your curriculum has been. So remember when you did X, Y, or Z project? And some of the kids are like, oh yeah, I made all these connections. And some other kid is like, oh, I never did that. Now you've got discrepancy in the learning at sixth grade because of the different experiences you have in the elementary
Or they
levels.
made it, but it broke in the hallway because that's where it was stored or presented.
And that's what
right?
they're gonna remember,
Yeah.
that it broke and it made a mess, not what the concept was they're supposed to learn. Because
I would say also the kids' student needs are different and meeting, there's a more, I would say, unique need in each student that walks through the door. And so in order to provide the best learning state for each student, the tools, the list of tools that are accessible for students is exhaustive. And we have those tools, but being able to use them in a efficient and appropriate manner is the challenge that we face. And teachers are creative and we end up supporting the students to the best of our ability, but could we do it better with different spaces? Yeah.
even, I mean, going back to our health, sorry to jump in here, but going back to our health report tonight, the students who are coming in with far more complex medical needs than, ever before, and those health room spaces, if you've got a kid with a medical need at this school, but they would actually maybe have better space available to them in a different school, like that's not fair to their, their learning or their, day-to-day life either.
And I know Ms. Bennon keeps talking about like the three-legged stool, right? But I think like that adds the complexity. Like I heard teacher retention even, like thinking about when we're asking teachers to do these really complex jobs, and if we're not equipping them with the right tools, like the reality is we have to look forward, right? The teacher pool doesn't continue to grow. So how are we retaining those like quality educators? Because as Janine said, like educators are creative and they'll do what they need to with the space they have. But if we really want to think about wellness and like retaining those top tier teachers, we need to make sure they feel like they have the space to do what they're asked with the students that they have.
I think the only, sorry, Angie, please go ahead.
No, go ahead, Maxud.
The only comment which I have is that I think this is the information sessions for us. We need to learn, absorb as much as possible, and believe in the experts, believe in the administrators, because we do want to provide the platform for the kids to succeed. And when we talk about high achieving district, we have to provide them platform, whether it's a playground, whether it's a classroom. I think it's very, very important, a good investment to be done, because we want our kids to shine when they go to undergraduate and high school. So this is our future. This is, I think we have to take it very seriously. And I believe in the experts, When I go to a doctor, I listen to his advice, although my grandmama says something to do else, for example, but I still, so it's very, very important that we listen to the experts as such. So thank you so much for you guys, what you're doing. I really appreciate, and I think Mr. Cromie did mention example is that right now, I think we are looking at a united ball, and slowly, as time comes up, we'll untie this and hopefully solve this problem for the rest of the, kids as such. So thank you, everyone.
Ditto, literally.
You were going to say exactly the same thing?
Exactly. Even about his grandma.
You have a grandma. Anybody else? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go under the white tab, everyone.
23-24 staffing update. Ms. Lancour, please.
Okay, so this evening you have the staffing report. This is kind of a really nice opportunity for us to reflect on the previous school year and kind of the full cycle from the start of the school year through completing our school year, and then taking a look at our educators and other staff members that were with us in the past school year and are no longer with us this current school year. So the staffing report looks a little different than it has in past years. Hopefully it's provided you with some more information and some data to kind of ground the different conversations that we have throughout the year. And we were lucky, and the timing was really great, that obviously teacher turnover, staff turnover is not unique to Franklin. This is something that's being evaluated at the state level as well as the national level. So the Wisconsin Policy Forum, the report was linked in that they had generated and released in August that really talks specifically to educator turnover in Wisconsin. So that was a really nice opportunity for us to kind of ground our data in the state data. Obviously there's national data data and everything else that can be evaluated, but just to give us a really good comparator of where are we in Franklin. So obviously you've had the report to review, but just to highlight for anybody that might not be here that hasn't had the opportunity to review it. It first kind of walks through certified staff turnover. So that is our educators and our administrators that receive a contract on a regular basis. So that's the term is certified. So our overall turnover for this past 22-23 year did increase. We went from 15.01% in the previous school year to 16.06%. That does include our retirements and resignations in the district. So while we did increase, it luckily wasn't significant. It wasn't a jump of 10%. And if we look at that public policy forum report, the state average of resignations for educators across the state of Wisconsin was 15.8%. So while we are higher than the state average, we are not that far off. And then we went into the policy report did a really great job of reframing how we look at how our staff leave the district. So they divided it into leaves versus moves. So leaves are educators and individuals that were on the state report from one previous year, and then they did not show up on the report the following year. So that's retirements. They moved to a different state. They moved from teaching in public to private. And in Franklin, we also specifically looked at it and considered it a part of educators who relocate. So if I'm an educator in Franklin, but I move to La Crosse, that's not necessarily something we can control, and I would be really impressed if those individuals would commute. So that's just something that we consider. And moves are, an educator is in one district 1 year in Wisconsin, and then they move to another district in Wisconsin in that same year. So those are more the ones that we focus on because that's within our span of control. That's feedback that we want to receive from those individuals to really understand why did they choose to move to an alternative district where they still were able to work in Franklin. So the chart shows kind of the past 3 years. So our leaves are increasing in terms of our overall turnover, and our moves are decreasing. So unfortunately, that's a sign that we have more and more people either moving out of state for the other reasons, more retirements that are coming through, as well as educators leaving with teaching altogether, which is never something we want to hear. We went into some little bit more of the specific reasons surrounding why individuals that specifically resigned from Franklin did leave Franklin altogether. Our biggest reason, unfortunately, as I mentioned this year, is leaving the profession altogether. So that's always really tough, but not something that's necessarily within our control. And then physical relocation or significant moves was also a big contributor this past school year. Apparently Colorado is a very nice place to live, and we had several people that moved. So, we wish them the best. The two pieces of the graph that are kind of popped out are specifically people that noted to us that they left because they got a better salary opportunity, right? So that's something that's within our span of control. And the other one being that they were able to teach a more specialized subject that we couldn't necessarily offer them for a teaching opportunity here in Franklin. So those were kind of the ones that we considered moves that we want to really dive a little bit deeper into to better understand. With turnover, obviously, we have new educators in our district as well this year, so it just gave a little bit more detail of those that are new to Franklin this year, their years of experience and the experience that they brought with them from prior districts. And then for the first time this year, we were able to provide some data on support staff. So historically, this is not, at least from my findings, something that has been closely tracked. It's still a little bit tricky to track just from the perspective of we're using, the number of positions that we've allotted in the budget. By no means necessarily are those positions all filled at any given time. So our data is really just grounded in that because that's something consistent that we use from year to year. So we did our best to track turnover of our support staff members. So you can see for custodians, food services, and educational assistants and office staff, obviously those numbers are much higher than our educators. It's something that we're really digging into and putting a lot of effort forth and having a lot of conversations of what can we do differently to retain them within our district and within our schools. One thing that, in the event that those individuals are going to resign, we did have 33% of them do it at the conclusion of the school year. So they've at least stayed with our students for the entire school year experience. And then obviously, while we would love for them to return the next year, in terms of a timing, that at least does give us a better opportunity to backfill their positions and be prepared for the upcoming school year. And then the final page in the report was just really specific to some initiatives that we're using to strive towards our goal of a better place to work. So it just lists some of the things that we're currently working on. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the work which you do, Ms. Lancourt. I always believe that teachers and the aides, are the biggest assets which this district has, and we cannot make it a better place to learn without this constant staff being there, because this turnover is definitely, does hurt the students' education big time. Although hopefully we are starting this initiative, and hopefully that will be able to address some of the concerns and increase in the retention with special eds, EAs, also regular EAs leaving. Do you have any information of how many of the EAs left the district because they were, for example, not only getting a better salary or more than salary, they were getting health benefits? Because I know that, in my email, which I alluded to you, it's sometimes difficult to track that, but if you can find out how many of the EAs are looking to get health benefits, which can increase the retention, and will that be, I think from my perspective, a good investment, because whatever we do to retain the teachers and the EAs must be done to improve the education of our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is something that Better Place to Work task force, that was absolutely a theme that was brought up amongst everybody that was there. So that's certainly something that is on the table to evaluate and take a look at.
Can I go?
Please.
I also wanted to thank you for the work you put in to put it in this report together. It gives us a lot more information than we've gotten in the past. Two things I want to push back on.
Okay.
Gently.
Yes.
Slide 4, and I emailed you about this. I do think when we're looking at the years of experience of educators coming into the district, a simple mean of a measure of how many years they've been here may not be the best measure. If you bring in 2 teachers who've each worked for 40 years, it's going to artificially skew your numbers up. And realistically, if we look at this, about 50% of the new educators we hired have 5 years or less experience. Not to say there's no judgment with that. I just think it's perhaps a slightly better.
Yeah.
You might consider presenting the data differently, or talk to your data specialist to see if they think I'm crazy.
It's good feedback.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that people choosing to leave the profession while under our care is really something completely out of our control?
No, I don't think that it's necessarily something out of our control. In the conversations that I've had with those that I do exit interviews with, and I will say from a perspective of, we get a great response from our educators that are leaving. We can do better to get more response levels from our support staff. That's an area that we're working on. But I would say it's absolutely, some things are within our control, and I think it's early detection. So I think it's having those stay interviews with them. It's never a great feeling when an educator comes to you and says, I've been having a terrible time and a terrible year, but we don't know enough about it to help support them. So I think it's having earlier conversations than when they're sitting in front of me saying, I'm leaving because I want to go in HR. Great, super appreciate that. But I think it's early conversations. And there's also been a lot of work done around how we can reframe the experience of educators in general in the country. So there, you will see a lot of news coming out about like teacher shortage summits, and they are working with all the stakeholders at the table, similar to like what we're doing on a micro level in Franklin, to really understand what does the experience look like now, and what are all the external different factors that are playing into that. So like, political feelings moving more into school environments. How is that affecting our educators in Franklin, where they feel like they are struggling to move forward with their roles effectively, and feeling like they're independent and want to stay in education and stay with our students?
I'm glad to hear you're thinking about it. I'm not surprised.
Linda, please.
I know you did kind of survey surrounding districts. How many of them do actually provide benefits? Is that pretty rare, or is it?
It's not rare at all. It's not a perfect, like, yes, they offer, yes, they don't. Really, different districts offer benefits based on the number of hours per day or average number of hours per week that their staff work, or that specific category works. So there are absolutely districts in the surrounding area that offer benefits to their educational assistants and other aides within the building. For the most part, those individuals are working 35 or more hours per week. And then the other districts that don't offer benefits to their educational assistants, it's really based on the fact that they're working less than 30 hours per week. So that's a big determining factor in whether or not so they could have different educational assistants within their building that are eligible for benefits and others that are not.
And it may be what they want to work? I mean, maybe they don't want to work full-time? Is that part of it too, or?
I think it's a couple of different factors. I think whether or not they, full-time opportunities, I think it's also the needs of the building. That might be considered as well, the enrollment of the students. So maybe you have students that have some needs in the morning, but then they are 4K and they only come to the morning session and then they aren't there in the afternoon. So I think it's a variety of factors.
Ann, please.
Just wanted to speak for a second about this Better Place to Work task force, which I'm really excited that is in place, and I'm excited to see where it goes. As I look at your resignation turnover pie graph here, and I know you said you pulled out the things that you felt you could control. I guess I would, like Angie, gently push back on the, that just those two pieces are 16%, I think, if my math is right, but it might not be. But if you add that position in another district to lessen commute, then all of a sudden that's 30% of your people leaving. And if you add in your leaving the teaching profession completely, it's 22%. And I'm just thinking, is it possible that if we can find some things in this Better Place to Work task force that make it more attractive to be here? Yeah, you might want to lessen your commute. People aren't going to lessen their commute necessarily just because of one thing. I feel like if we can find some maybe creative solutions or new different things and really hear that feedback from our staff, they might be more inclined to stay when they feel heard and valued, and that might reduce, this is 50% of the people who are leaving. Maybe those are some issues that we can control, or not control, but at least have an impact on.
Absolutely. And just to clarify, by no means is that everybody has a variety of reasons that they ultimately choose to change where they work, right? This is the main reason that they reported to us. So by no means does it mean that someone who moved to another district to lessen their commute because I can go to a school that's 5 minutes from my home, by no means does that not mean that they necessarily didn't negotiate a higher salary for themselves as well. So these are really just based off of if we had to ask them to pick one reason to let us know, just for our knowledge base, this is what they select on the survey.
I think that people stay, or more willing to stay someplace in a job, in a situation where they feel supported and, feel welcome in the culture and feel like there's, future there, 5 or 10 minutes off my commute, but I'm excited to see where the work of the Better Place to Work task force goes, because I'm hoping that we can make some improvements. So thanks.
Well, I like that we're being proactive in what we're with the task force. We're being proactive in a lot of ways, and I think that's a hallmark of this administration. So I think this is being proactive. You're right. Those two we have the most control over. We certainly don't have any control over over people moving to Colorado.
I don't.
But position in another district, lessen commute, we have somewhat control, right? So
absolutely.
Being proactive and knowing when those things might happen, I hope it helps around the margins, and then we truly are the best place to work, not just one of the best places to work.
I think Mary had a question.
Please, Mary.
So I seem to remember when I was on that side of the table, that there was some type of mechanism where teachers were able to not collaborate, but just communicate, like, I'm really struggling with something, or there was a pipeline to the principal, but it was more of a little group type of scenario. I mean, if teachers are struggling and just getting to the breaking point, what is the mechanism for them not to feel like they're just out there by themselves. I thought there was something, some mechanism for them to just have that ongoing communication with other teachers.
I think there are a lot of opportunities for them to collaborate, and I think we've really worked hard to create those situations more openly, especially in the past year or so. So obviously they have within their building, but that can be isolating, right? So, you know, you want to believe that everybody has their people within their building, but we also want to give them the opportunity to talk to others. So obviously we do our surveys and things like that from the level, but that's only really like one-way communication. So a really great thing that we've incorporated at our PD days was really the opportunity for them to collaborate in groups of people that they may not normally work with outside of not only the curriculum times, but those gear up sessions are complete choice. So they might meet with another educator that might be struggling with something or sharing similar challenges, that then they have the opportunity to build that relationship and have those conversations continue even outside of their own building. I think the other outlet that we've really tried to grow in the past couple of years is that mentor-mentee relationship. So every new educator that comes into Franklin gets a mentor regardless of how many years they've been an educator. And they have the opportunity to obviously learn the Franklin-y things, but also really if they're struggling with something or they need someone to go to, they have that mentor opportunity. And that mentor can sometimes be in their building, and it can sometimes be outside of their building. So obviously we've done a great job with building that framework with our educators, but it should be something that we can kind of take a step back and look and how do we brand that out to all of our employees and give them the opportunity as well.
And it's proactive. It's not just, the onus is not on the person struggling. Are they approached and said, hey, how's it going? So it's a proactive type of interaction.
Yep.
Great. Yay. Thank you.
And the principals do rounding too between like the pulse survey, so that's kind of another opportunity, like that they're having someone come to them proactively and make sure to make a connection.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thank you very much, Ms. Lancour. 23-24 budget and tax levy, Mr. Cromie. This is an action item.
Yep, so this was presented on October 11th. If you recall, at that time I mentioned there will be potentially a couple of adjustments around the state aid certification, which does come out technically October 15th. This year was moved to October 13th, with that being a Sunday. And then ultimately that helps us then set the property tax levy for general fund. A couple of adjustments on that. State aid went down $400-ish thousand or so. Our levy ended up going up about $500,000. So a little bit of additional income there. Some of it was related to uncounted pupils from last year. So just a little bit on that. How do those get uncounted? Those are typically open enrollment students out. MPS has a notorious backlog of doing a terrible job of third Friday accounting. So that typically happens for all suburban districts every year, some adjustment based on open enrollment out. In any case, that netted us about an additional $40,000. We took that $40,000 and, or I should say about $40,000 in total after recalculating with the dollars that we had. Remember, we were about $5,000 to the good. When we talked on October 11th, and we applied that to our special education EAs, and essentially providing a holistic increase of 7.5% to that subsection of our educational assistance, which raised our lowest wage to $19 an hour, which is now tied for the highest in the area. And then subsequently, everybody that would fall within that range would receive that 7.5% so that they were moved up as well along with everybody else. That does put our budget in the red, $688. I guess when I weighed out the ability to do that and be $688, we're probably going to wash that out in the end anyway, so I didn't look at that as too large of a concern. So those are really the only adjustments to the Fund 10, the General Fund 10, property tax levy, reduction in our state aid. Those for the most part wash each other out, and then that change to special education EAs. 5% is still across the board for everybody else. in speaking large buckets, but that subsection for our special education EAs was really the major change as far as an expense is concerned. When we take a look then at our overall levy, we're still adding referendum debt service. That dropped slightly due to the increase in regular education, that general fund amount, but still at additional levy of $6.3 million. As we discussed on October 11th in that totally separate part of the budget piece, but we talked about that extra debt service. That would be applied as a defeasance potentially, or would be applied as a first payment should we continue further down this facility pathway and something is ultimately determined and borrowing is going to need to happen, because much more bang for a buck will come out of that, almost dollar for dollar versus about 37 cents on the dollar on a defeasance. Still is worth participating in because it still decreases overall interest payments, but determining the exact use for it will follow this path down the way, and then once we have some definitive understanding of what that is, we'll make that decision at that time.
Thank you. Angie.
Any other questions? No? Okay.
Angie, please.
Thanks, Mr. Cromie. Throughout this budget process, you've been careful to be transparent with us and tell us what's going on to the best of your ability. It's really been educational for all of us, and I appreciate your expertise in this area. I know we're going to have a spirited debate here in a little bit, and so I'm just wanting to say that and really it comes down to, is holding the mill rate steady a reasonable approach to the budget, or is it not? And there's not a value judgment in that one way or another. I think you're proposing it out of good faith and not because you're trying to pull a fast one on us. I've spoken before about why I think it's a good idea to look at the mill rate, but one big reason goes to what you were saying, Maksud. We would love to be able, I think many of us would love to be able to pay our teachers a little bit more if given the chance. And so if we hold our bubble of our mill rate at a certain amount over time, if the state legislature sees fit to increase our per pupil spending at some point in time, we could just blow up that part of the bubble within the already established mill rate and accomplish some of those goals which we all hold, because as we all agree, the teachers and the aides and the staff within the buildings is the most important thing. I also just want to clarify, the number 13% is going to get thrown around here. It's a very emotional number to hear that our total tax levy would go up by 13%. I just want to clarify that that 13% is applied over the overall value of the district. When I look at my tax bill, the only way, if we hold our mill rate steady, the only variable that's going to affect what my tax bill is what happened to my home assessment value. And from what I can tell, it went up about 5% for the median homeowner in Franklin over the past year. So why would the overall levy be a 13% increase? Well, that goes back to the astonishing rate of growth in our district, which we've only just now started paying attention to. I don't remember ever seeing in previous budget presentations notification of how much of the increase in property valuation comes from new construction. And I think it's valuable to keep track of that and address the fact that it's been happening now for about 5-6 years. And that's why I think it's a reasonable approach. In fact, of the 4 debt service options that Mr. Cromie presented to us, the one that's included in the budget, holding the mill rate steady at 8.55%, would raise people's property tax value in line with what their home value increased over the past year. The others would actually drop their property taxes. And I don't think, given what we see coming down the pipe, in terms of wanting to be able to pay teachers more, God willing, and the creek don't rise, and a realistic approach to what's being presented to us, these various 3-legged stool challenges aren't going anywhere. I think it's reasonable to want to hold the mill rate steady so that we can flex and adapt to these changes as they happen. We can control what we can in the face of a capricious state funding situation, plan for the future, and avoid the urge to react to emotional soundbite type decisions that might make sense in the very, very short term only. That's it. That's my little
Thank you.
coffee talk.
Linda, please.
I guess I first have a question, Mr. Cromie, regarding the $6 million, whether it will be defeased or a down payment. I mean, it's going to be in the debt service fund, which is a restricted fund. It can only be used for debt service. Are you saying you would transfer that to a capital fund if a different decision was made? Is that even possible?
I don't think I said that at all. I think I said it would either be used as defeasance or the first payment towards debt.
Isn't that like a down payment?
I didn't say anything about transferring it to a capital fund. It would just be used as the first payment, so essentially balloon payment. Think balloon payments were like popular in the 80s and early 90s, right, for houses, right? People would, because interest rates were crazy high.
I don't think you need to go into that. You don't need to go into that. I'm sorry, I don't need to hear that.
I want to hear it.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so people took out variable interest rates at that particular time because home interest rates were 10%, whatever have you. So they would take out a variable interest rate of 5% and they'd pay a smaller amount, but then they'd have this huge balloon payment at the end. Typically, people refinanced up until that point to avoid that payment. This is kind of looking at that in reverse. So if we'd have that option, we would take a balloon, essentially put a balloon payment on our very first payment of new debt, so that we're not paying 20 years of interest on that $6.3 million. We'd be paying it off immediately versus paying 20 years of interest on it. And then looking at the correlation from a financial advisor, is roughly it's $1 for $1 in interest savings. Now, there's a lot of variables between now and then when we take out the debt. Does interest rates continue to rise? Do they go down? They're the experts in that particular field, so they're taking their best stab at all of the variables and plugging that in. But essentially, that would save about $1 for $1 in interest, so about $6.3 million-ish. If we used it kind of to balloon that first payment versus hold on to it, or defease a lower interest rate item now that has less years of interest to pay on it. I still think both are valuable because we're still paying those dollars either way. Like that interest payment goes out either way. But if we can lop off a 20-year interest versus a 5 or 6 year interest, I think that's a better move on our behalf.
Maksoud, please.
First of all, I'd like to kind of really thank Mr. Cromie. It's a very difficult budget. And as a board member, I acknowledge and recognize your hard work, which you have put in. And the tremendous amount of emails, replies which you have done, I really appreciate. Being open and as transparent as possible. So thank you so much for what you're doing. Take into consideration, our expenses are increasing. Healthcare cost itself is going to cost us 10% more. We also want to increase our attention, hopefully with the committee which we are having right now, and not the teachers and the teacher aides at the same time, but which are the biggest asset the school district has. We also need to, I think, look forward into a possible next year referendum, which we're looking into. The inflation has affected a lot of individuals. Unfortunately, Social Security benefits, retirement benefits, hasn't paced to that inflation amount. And I completely 100% believe that Mr. Cromie has the best of the intentions in supporting our district in future planning. At the same time, when I was looking at different scenarios, the 1, 2, 3, and 4, which was very clear to me and very simplified for me to understand, Mr. Cromie. Thank you for doing that. I was just thinking about our retirees and veterans who have served this country, whether in uniform or they have served the district in different ways by paying the taxes, raised the kids, and have at the age of retirement right now. So we need to be cognizant that this is a district and which cherishes all different ages of communities. And when I'm looking at the debt service fund, although the scenario which is being recommended does hold our mill rate, and we want to do that if possible. I was thinking if there's a middle ground where we can achieve both the goals to the best of our abilities. And when calculating, if we're, of course, it has to be brought up as an amendment or as, if we were to increase the debt, increase levy by 4%, which still pays us a debt service fund of 8,038,000, plus we are getting 1.5 million from the state to decrease the property taxes. So actually we'll be paying 9.5 million, but we'll be actually using the 1.5 million to decrease the property. So it kind of balances out, and still we are paying around 8 million for the debt service, relocating. So I think planning for the future at the same time balancing balancing the budget for inflation, current inflation, and taking into consideration of different socioeconomic groups which live. Although Franklin is a very affluent district, but still, as some of the committee members have mentioned, and I've spoken to many other committee members, they are concerned that they want to support the district. For the platform, we want you to, kids at the same time, they want to take into consideration their pocketbooks as such. So I'll definitely kind of, I just wanted to kind of humbly request. I know that all of us have the best intentions here, and being a son of an educator, I believe that 100% our teachers and our teacher aides are the biggest assets. If we can do anything by either increasing the salaries or providing the benefits, whatever we do, but if we can start retaining them 100%, and we have no resignations, that will be the game changer for our district. Of course, that's a dream, I'm sure. I'm sure there will be still some relocations which we can't control, but if any of our teachers or teacher aides are leaving because of better benefits or better salary, and if we can in the future somehow address that, that will be very, very important to decrease the outflow of this valuable assets and increase their retention. Thank you.
Yeah, Ann,
Okay.
please. Sorry.
We're just looking at each other.
Sorry.
I guess when I looked at the budget and when I had talked with Mr. Cromie earlier this year, I appreciate the idea or the planning around maintaining that mill rate in terms of offering consistency to our taxpayers and, community members, citizens. We certainly could change the mill rate, right? We could lower it all of a sudden this year a little bit. We could do things with it. But then what's going to happen next year when we don't know what we're going to get from the state or anybody? You know what I mean? What other factors are playing into that? Are we then going to have to doubly raise to make up for those differences? And the idea of consistent mill rate keeps things a little bit more conservatively planned and more, we can predict that a little bit more, and it keeps things a little bit more steady. So we're not, we're lowering property taxes this year, but now we're gonna have to raise them, 3 or 4 times in order to make, there's just, I don't know. When I think about a budget, I want to kind of be consistent. I don't think it serves our citizens, taxpayers very well to be like, okay, this year we're going down, next year we're going up, but maybe next year will kind of stay the same. I just think people are looking for a more consistent plan. And I think that the budget as presented, maintaining the mill rate, achieves that goal of consistency, planning for the future, which is our job, having that conservative approach with our budget, and allowing us to do the things that we need to do without going to wild extremes one way or the other.
Thank you. Linda, please.
I'd like to move to amend the budget to reduce debt service expenditures and tax levy by 4.6 million.
Can you wait for a
don't have a
second, because
motion on the
we
table
need to have
yet.
a motion first.
Okay, well then I would like
But
to,
I'm going to hear your amendment as soon as as soon as there's a motion on the floor.
okay.
I move to accept the budget as presented.
Second.
All right, the motion was made by Dr. Beer and seconded by Mrs. Yank to move, to adopt the 23-24 budget and tax levy as presented. And Mrs. Witkowski has a would like to propose an amendment.
Yes.
I believe we can only do one at a time. The budget is separate from the levy. So this is a motion to accept the budget as presented. The levy is a separate item.
Well, then I guess I move to amend the budget to reduce the debt service expenditures by $4.6 million. And this results in the tax levy similar to the prior year, which would be an increase of 0.11% versus the 13% that we are currently looking at. And this reduction has no impact to our educational program, but it does impact everyone in our school community. 13% is not consistent with past experience. Keep in mind, there is no justification for the increase. We have no new referendum. We have no new buildings approved. The voters decide what they want to build and how much they want to spend. They haven't even been asked yet. There is no referendum. They don't know what they're doing. And you cannot say you are saving taxpayers interest on bonds. At the same time, you are increasing their taxes 13%. One thing does not happen without the other. And you cannot look at the new subdivisions with their big homes and say they can afford it. This ignores the 36,000 current residents who have built their homes years ago, raised their families, and want to see their children make Franklin their home also. We do not build a community by people coming for the schools, but leaving because of the taxes. The school tax levy is the largest portion of the tax bill at 40%. The city's portion is 25%, followed by the county at 22%. We do not need to tax Franklin forward to move Franklin forward. We built a new middle school in the last 5 years. During that time period, the tax increase was no higher than 1.5%. I supported that building. I urge your support in reducing the tax levy to last year's levels. We watched the state budget process that was focused on reducing taxes, and we saw an increase in equalization aid of $1.6 million, or 6.5%. We have an opportunity to stabilize taxes, not rates, but taxes, at last year's level. I urge your support of the amendment.
There's a motion on the table. We need to, or on the floor.
There's a motion on the floor.
I would second that motion.
All right, motion has been made and seconded for an amendment to reduce the budget and tax levy by $4.6 million.
I just want to clarify that that would not be holding my personal amount of my tax bill that goes to the district steady. It would actually be decreasing it because 8% of 1 point something percent of whatever the total levy is going to brand new construction.
I don't know if you can make that statement.
Okay.
Because the rate is determined by total levy divided by equalized value. And if equalized value goes up 13% and you use the same rate, it's going to be 13%. I don't know how the math can work otherwise.
All right, so motion and a second. So there, we'd like to vote. I'd like a vote on the amendment to the tax levy, unless there's further discussion. And we need a.
Can I make amendment to the amendment, or I have to wait till the amendment is passed?
You can't. Oh, okay.
You can. Well, there is I'd like to call vote on the.
And then you can make another amendment.
Then
if
you
you'd
can make
like.
yes. We need a roll call vote, sorry.
Mr. Sprague,
I vote no.
Dr. Beer,
No.
Mrs. Witkowski,
Yes.
Dr. Khan,
No.
Mrs. Sapersky,
No.
Mrs. Yank,
I vote no.
and I vote yes. The motion, the amendment fails 5-2.
Thank you. Dr. Khan, you had said something about an amendment.
I'd like to bring an amendment to increase the tax levy by 4%.
I'm sorry, to increase the tax levy by 4%.
What are you doing to the budget? We have a motion on the budget on the table. So you have to pick a line item in the budget.
By bring a motion to basically have the debt service, are we talking about the debt service specifically, or?
That's how Mrs. Witkowski phrased it, so yeah.
Debt service amount to be 8,038,000.
Your amendment says that you want to increase the debt service by 8 million.
Yeah, basically, for the debt service fund, the amount to be 8,038,000 instead of 7,260,000.
So you're quoting a higher number.
This is currently referenced as 10.8 million.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he's making it
Okay.
to be, what'd you say, 8?
8,038,000.
So the motion is made by Dr. Khan. Yes?
Yes, the motion is, motion for an amendment to reduce the budget from 10,860,100 to 8,038,000, which is a reduction of 2 million. $822,100. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Could I have the number again?
I wish I'd written it down. 2,822,000.
Oh, I have something different. But
He's doing the difference between Maksud's number and the original number.
So we're taking 10,860,100 minus what? 8,038,197?
So,
No.
no. So,
It's reducing total debt levy to $8,038,000, which is a reduction of $2,822,100.
What's the significance of that number? Did you just pluck that out of the?
So the reason of my proposition is at the same time when we want to think Franklin forward, we want to ensure that we prepare our district having.
Dr. Khan, before you go on, you need a second. I'll second your motion and then we can continue the discussion. So I second that motion.
So the reason of my proposition is we want to plan for the future by able to pay off as much of debt possible. It's always a good thing to pay off the debt because that saves us the interest in the long term. At the same time, we have to be cognizant of the current economic situation and the amount of financial, I'll not use the word strain, but the cost to the taxpayer. Because we are paying a reasonable amount of debt, more than we are required to, which is always good. It's a healthy practice. It does increase, I think maybe a mill rate to somewhere around 8.
I'd like that number, please.
793, I believe.
793, you know. So it is giving us some cushion to pay off the debt, at the same time able to take into account our elderly senior citizens and people who have median salary. Although Franklin is a pre-affluent suburb, but still we have a lot of homes which are average, I think, home value, as I saw in the email, is around $350,000. So that tells us that we are affluent suburb, but we are not a very rich suburb with a lot of people making big figures. So we want to take into consideration what our taxpayers are able to pay. So we are able to be close to 8% of the mill rate, at the same time be able to pay off the debt. That was my thought process. It's a middle ground where we are not paying the debt. We are paying the debt, but at the same time taking into consideration what people can afford. You know, like for example, if I have right now $100 in my pocket and I have $200 of debt, at the same time I have to buy my groceries, I have to pay my other utilities and all that stuff. I have to plan. I want to pay off the debt as much as possible, and definitely that's always recommended. But we have to take into consideration what our general community members can afford as such.
So is your goal to cut an individual community member's taxes? Lower them?
My goal is to take into consideration when we are levying the tax levy, take into consideration everyone.
I understand, but this would actually lower their taxes.
It would increase it about 0.92%.
Versus the 13%? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Correct.
Just for clarification, $7.94.
Maybe it's
So
5%.
rounding.
I think it's actually 5%. Let me double check that.
All right, we have a motion.
Motion.
I second it.
Motion's been made and seconded.
I would say can I speak?
Please.
Okay. I would say that inflation is at an all-time 40-year high right now. Car repossessions are at an all-time high. Food prices have nearly doubled in the last 2 years, and interest rates are at an all-time high. Our staff is suffering a 10% cost increase in their insurance benefits. Some of our staff are also community members, and they are our constituents. Please keep that in mind. Mrs. Yank, I don't mean to pick on you, but you have openly said that you are here for the teachers, and I feel that if you vote for a 13% tax increase and offer the teachers a 10% insurance increase, you are not here for the teachers. Who are you here for then? I would add that our district has some internal situations, and I know people will tell me that this has nothing to do with the budget, but in my heart, I believe it does. We've got some special ed parents that are asking for help. Yes, we're making changes with pay increases for the special education aides, but what about our other aides? What about our teachers? Isn't this what we need to fix? Don't we have to fix what's wrong before we keep moving forward? And I guess I refer to the whole moving forward idea as well. Our district's rankings have slipped as far as our area schools go. Muskego would have once wanted to be Franklin, but now we want to be Muskego. I remember a time when I got on this board when all I knew I wanted to do was chase Greendale. Now I'm chasing Greendale, now I'm chasing Muskego. The bottom line is I'm not comfortable with raising taxes 13% this year and then coming back again next year and saying, oh, by the way, we raised your taxes 13% last year. Do you remember that? Now we want more money because we want to build. We want to do a referendum. We need more. We need better. We need prettier. I don't think we can do this to our citizens. We have never, ever had a 13% tax increase. And I don't know how anybody can feel comfortable offering something like that to our citizens. There are 3 members of this board that are up for reelection next year. Please keep that in mind. Recently, one of you said to me, "We have so much work to do. I want to be on the board again next year." Do you think that is really reasonable if you raise taxes 13% this year and then come back again next year and ask for even more money? I don't see it happening. I don't see it happening. I've lived through referendums before. I've lived through this. It's not going to happen, friends. Our citizens will not go for that kind of tax increase and then give you more money next year. So you really have to make a choice here. You have to make a decision. Do you want to keep taxes relatively stable this year and then come back and ask for some more money next year and build that model elementary school if that's what we so desire? But you're not getting both. You're not getting both. I can guarantee you that. I implore you to think about what you are voting on. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else have further comment? Linda, please.
I just want to reemphasize that, again, any kind of debt payment should really have voter approval. We don't have that here. We're putting, it's like we're levying before we got the building. I will support the 4%. I'm sorry, it's a 5% increase. It's not the best choice, but 13% is just way out of line.
It is a better choice than 13%. I would agree with you.
I still am bothered by any kind of prepayment without any voter approval.
Linda, I've been on the board for 5 years. This is my 5th budget I've voted on. And this is the 3rd time defeasance has come before the board. This is what the legislature, this is one of the levers the legislature has given us. Because we ask for local control at the school board level, they tell the citizens that their taxes have been reduced, and they ask us to increase and pay and use it, but not increase the mill rate. We can do it up to the mill rate because that's the lever that is offered to us.
I have to tell you that the mill rate is not part of school funding. It is part of control at the city level and the county level, but is not part of any kind of revenue limits for school funding. Is that correct, Mr. Cromie?
It is how they determine the amount you can defease is one of the tools, is maintaining.
No, my question is there any control from the state on the levy rate?
No, there's no control from the state on your total levy either.
There is control, though, on the general fund.
On a general fund, correct, but not on your total levy.
Because, and the only thing outside that is debt service.
Incorrect. Fund 80
Okay,
is
your
recreation.
recreation, yes, but in most districts, the only thing outside the revenue limit is debt service. And the reason would be because you gotta pay your debts. But to prepay debt, I would disagree that it's encouraged. I would say it's going around the intent of controlling taxes for school purposes. It's not right. But we're talking about a 5% increase here versus 13.
Do you think that, the consideration when people are looking at a referendum is sort of a cumulative what's happened over the past 5 years? Or is it going to be more, what is this going to do to my taxes from this year to next year?
I think it's both. I do think it is both. But I think that you are setting yourself up for failure with a 13% increase. We have been called at one point, we've never increased taxes 13%. But we have been referred to, the school board, prior to probably most of you being on this board, as taxing assassins. that's how I'm feeling right now. I'm feeling, wow, that is accurate. And with, in my head, knowing with Franklin Forward here, that we're moving forward to a referendum, there's no denying it. There's no denying it. It's just a matter of what it's going to be. I don't see citizens saying, look what you did to my tax bill this year, and now you want more money again next year? We don't know what next year is going to hold. What if next year is worse than it is now? And you're going to get a lot of voters out there in 2024. It's a presidential election, so you're going to get a lot of voters out there. I think it's a huge mistake, and quite honestly, I think it's a huge mistake for administration here. I've lived through a time, maybe Mary, you can agree with me, maybe you were on the board then. We practically had a superintendent run out of town on a failed referendum, correct? It's not a good setup. You're not setting us up for success with 13%. You're just not. You're not setting it. We're not losing any programs. We're not losing any staff. We're not shutting down buildings. We're not cutting sports. We're not cutting anything. But yet we're going to tell our taxpayers we've all agreed to 13% and we're all okay with that in this economy?
Can I ask a clarifying question? You are referring to 13%. I heard earlier 13% is not, that this budget is not a 13% increase. Mr. Cromie, can you explain the different thinking there? Are we raising taxes 13%?
Well, I'm gonna have to redo this, so you'll just have to bear with me here for a moment. Find
What number
the
do you
motion.
need?
Well, yeah, I'm like toggling
You
back
ask
and
about the
forth and
current
trying to.
budget.
I understand that. I've been changing the worksheet as we've been modifying. So the worksheet itself has been
This
changing.
is your, right here.
Sorry there. I'm used to 2 screens. Makes life a whole lot easier. So can you ask me the question again, please? That will help me.
Sure, I just, we're hearing, I think there's just different terms and there's different, I feel like I'm in a bad, a PR firm or something, like trying to make the numbers sound the way you want them to sound. What is your actual tax increase?
So if we look at the raw amount from last year, 34,648,559, to the proposed amount tonight of 39,284,642, sorry, that is 13% in total increase from one year to the next. If we just look at raw value dollars. On every individual home, some are gonna go down, some are gonna go up, plus or minus more than 13% potentially, or
based on
down 13%.
their home value,
Their assessed
Correct.
value.
the assessed value,
Right.
which is related more so to the mill rate.
Bottom line, we are increasing taxes 13%.
And I
It doesn't
believe
have to
we
get any
were
more
reassessed
complicated than that.
last year or this year. I think
It's
we were
13%.
also
I think we
were
reassessed.
reassessed last year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm trying to take the emotion down a little bit because I don't want to make a decision based on fear of the upcoming election.
I mean, it's a
Why-
reality. It is a reality.
It is, but
That's
I
not-
want to make.
That's not how we make decisions.
I
We-
understand that, but I'm just
So,
saying to you, it's part
why
of
do
the
you think it's a
reality.
good idea? Because you clearly want to set us up for success
And you live in
with
Franklin.
a potential referendum. I'm asking this honestly. Why do
Yeah,
you
100%.
think this is a good idea?
I think we're looking at large numbers potentially for a referendum, right? I mean, there's no denying that. If you want a field house and you want tech ed spaces and you want an updated pool, it doesn't nothing grand, but the ability to have WIA meets there and have some spectators. My simple brain puts that at like $120 million. And we haven't touched an elementary school and we haven't touched $96 million. So as I presented on October 11th, not defeasing, but additional levy gets us as close to keeping that as flat as possible using a $150 million number. I don't want to say I pulled it out of thin air, but my math was like, those three spaces are like $120 million. And we haven't touched anything else. Haven't done a single thing to anything else.
So really it comes down to, do we sort of make it more palatable by having it not be a significant change? Or do we wait and pose the question? That's really how I
Which I would agree with you, because what I was going to say after Mr. Cromie was finished talking is, we don't know what our community would support. Would our community support a new elementary school, or would our community, to Linda's point, say, redistrict, work through it, we'll buy you some new furniture, you know, or would our community say, we absolutely want this field house, we absolutely want tech ed space, you know, more kids are going into the trades now, do we want to go that route? But we don't even know what our community will support.
I'm not disagreeing
No,
with any
I
of that.
understand, I'm looking your direction.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree with any of that. And as a community member, those are just things I hear in the community, right? But I also get to work here and sit in on all those meetings, so I hear all of those pieces too, right? So like, I get a big picture. I might get a bigger picture than like Jess Moe, who sits in a lot of those too, but doesn't live in the community and doesn't go to tons of events and hear people talk or have people ask them questions, right? So I just get a different perspective being a community member and being an employee who works here. So like that's my angle in coming from it, is that. Like those are the things that I hear people want. And I know we have these needs. Our elementary schools are clearly different from one to the next. And what they can particularly offer, right? And I've gone or worked in the community where we have the same challenges we have here, where our schedule is driven by physical education and when we can have lunch. And so that's not a great model for our kids, because it's not setting them up for the best of success. I agree in principle on the playground set, that like, is the playground the ultimate thing to hang your hat on? No, but is it a great learning tool for kids? Yeah, we go to Kayla's playground all the time, so you get to see the smaller pieces and kids on that to the bigger pieces, and you get to see kids of differing abilities go to that particular playground that can't go to every playground, right? So that's a component, and you have to factor all of that in. We just have to be more cognizant, I think, today than we would have been 30 years ago. People didn't talk about an adaptive playground 30 years ago. Like, it just
wasn't a thing.
This is it. Well, guess you can't go to the playground. Well, that's not, the world we live in isn't going to allow that to happen now, right? We're going to have to figure out how to make it work. So when I think about the district holistically, it's like you're putting all those pieces in, and that number of 150 million that we talked about in October, again, I'm not pitching that, and I know it's scary because it's huge. Like $150 million is a huge amount. But I think realistically, when I put all of those pieces together, that gets us part of the way. It certainly wouldn't get us the whole way. If you wanted to build a brand new elementary, do all that, and fix $96 million worth of stuff, like, it's not getting that done. But does it get us a good portion of the way? Probably.
I think we're all reasonable people, though, and I don't think we're all sitting here thinking we're gonna build this,
Yeah,
build
no.
that, fix it. You know, I think
No,
we
I don't think
understand
I think you're
that.
right.
You know, there's a progression to all of those important things, and they are all important.
And I think we need to ask our citizens first.
Well, but I think we set ourselves up.
That's the question.
I think we set ourselves up for we're trying to set ourselves up for success for a question that we're inevitably going to have. You're right, Debbie. We're going to have a referendum, likely. Andy said something last year that I thought was really important and true. Our community is going to tell us how much money to spend at some point. And we are trying to set ourselves up for this budget, I think, sets ourselves up for a level rate for each citizen to pay an amount And then to move forward next year, it gives us flexibility for the future.
I'm struggling with the
We
fact that
asked
this is
for-
going to
we-
come down to sound bites.
We asked for Linda, you used to ask for a 10-year plan all the time, and wasn't really ever provided. And now we have a 10-year plan.
Should be a 20-year plan. That's $100 million should be 20 years, not 10 years, but that's another discussion.
Okay, so the numbers are wrong again.
They're right, but just change the years. I didn't throw them all out.
This is hard. Debbie.
Please, Maksud, say
Yeah,
something.
you've had your hand up.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
I don't mean to
I
chuckle.
truly believe that all of us have the best intentions here. All of us are board members. We commit our time. All of us cherish the Franklin School District, and I'll say kudos to Annalia and Mr. Cromie for running the district the way you guys are kind of coming up and doing an amazing job, because you guys came all of a sudden and picked up the district, and you're taking with all the initiatives which are very energizes me, because it kind of does see that we are trying to do a good positive change with the teachers, with the committees which are finding to address the retention. So all of us have good intentions here. If the mill rate is 7.93 instead of 8.55, my question to all of you guys is that from 7.68 to 8.55, if it's 7.93 of a mill rate, I personally believe that it does give us a little bit of a cushion, at the same time paying off debt, but at the same time, possibly next year going for a referendum, and we want this platform to the kids. Education has changed in the past 20 years. Right now, playground can be a place of learning. We want more electricians, plumbers, all the skill force, because as a country we're lacking in that. We need to provide that, and we need to provide that platform to our kids. So we need that spaces. Always, I believe that we have to take a step back without bringing our emotions in, and look at a holistic approach of how we can increase our retention of the teachers and the aides, which are so valuable to me and all of us, I'm sure, because that is the most, it's a priceless component of our district, the teachers and the aides, making sure that we are able to retain them and do whatever we can. At the same time, planning in a way for the future which can be sustainable, not only this year, but also next year. Hopefully, I'm hoping that a mill rate of 7.93, if we do a referendum, whatever the mill rate becomes, but at least be more palatable, where our citizens can absorb this day with the inflation which is going on. We can't ignore the inflation. We can't ignore the bills which our citizens have to pay. Not everybody have deep pockets. Some people are struggling in the community, and we have to take into consideration each and every member of the community. Please.
Angie, please.
I'm considering Maksud's amendment, and I didn't think I would. And the reason is not so much necessary. I believe the content of Debbie's comments was largely accurate, but the emotion with which they were delivered was a microcosm of the soundbite laden opposition that we will get to a referendum from parts of the community on principle. And I just am thinking about researching previous referendums which have failed in this community, and there are members of our community that will work really hard to make sure that a referendum fails no matter what. I'm not saying that, Debbie, you are that, but I'm just saying that your level of emotion is probably representative of it. And that makes me scared. It makes me not like gut level scared, like it'll be fine, like, but I think that's one data point that I hadn't considered. I believed that we could go to the citizenry and say, look, this is not going to affect your effective tax rate that much, because let me explain to you the mill rate. But the soundbite of they raised taxes 13% and now they want us to pay more, that does concern me.
One of the things.
And I'm trying not to react emotionally, but I think there's so.
Okay, go ahead, Linda.
So what do you mean when it's a soundbite? What does that mean?
Because I don't think that most people, I'm not saying it's not true, but I'm saying it's nuanced. I think there's some nuance to the conversation as we've all been having here, but 99.5% of this community isn't going to want to have a nuanced conversation about school funding statutes. I'm not saying, I don't think anyone here is lying, but I think that you can take the same information and spin it different ways. And I'm not.
Okay, right. You can focus on different things. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but the 13% is real.
Linda, I'm not saying it's not real.
Okay, thank you.
But I'm not saying it's the effective effect on every homeowner's taxes.
And I keep hearing, the voters are going to say no to a referendum. The voters don't know yet, right? Like, we are learning. We are going to have, I think if we look at our Gantt chart, it's probably in here. I think it's the month of February, we'll be having a lot of community listening sessions to hear from the community what they're interested in. We don't even know yet what we're doing. So I hesitate to make major decisions about what may or may not happen with voters who may or may not vote for something that may or may not happen. Like, that's a lot of questions in the future too. We've all heard, yeah, I want a field house or a pool, like Mr. Comey says, but we don't know yet what that is going to look like. We are still learning ourselves at the table, and then we have to hear from our community. So it's a little bit cart before the horse to be trying to make any decisions based on what voters may or may not approve in a referendum.
Can we have a 3-minute recess for me to be alone with my thoughts in the bathroom? I need a bathroom break. No? Okay, let's get this voted on.
Can I ask just a quick question?
Please, Mary.
So and Dr. Khan has kindly filled me in, I understand what he's proposing. If we reduce the debt service by the $2 million, because, again, Franklin's building at a breakneck pace, people are selling their homes with lightning speed, is it more likely that with an increased tax base, we'll be able to pay that off sooner down the road? I don't know if that makes
Only if the
even any
board
sense, how I
chooses
said that.
The fees.
Yeah, only if the board chooses to have additional levy.
So at some point-
Otherwise, it would just get paid off at its normal rate.
'Cause
So
I love paying
regardless
off
of
debt.
property value, the board has to approve additional levy. That's the only way to do that.
Regardless of how we vote, you have my support, and I don't want whatever happens with the budget here to be seen as, at least for me, as a position statement on the work of the administration. You're doing good work. And
I would echo that. I mean, honestly, for the 100 years I've been on the board, I've learned more about budgeting from you than I ever did from our previous business manager. He's a great man. He was great at his job, but I have honestly learned more from you than I ever want to know about budgets, to be perfectly honest with you. But I mean, I do. I think you're doing great jobs, and I don't want the good work that you're doing now with this. And if you think I don't want this, you're very, very
No,
wrong.
that's not what I meant.
Very wrong. I don't want all that great work to be for naught, Because whether you believe it or not, I do have this experience, and I do believe that our community will shut us down if we go 13% this year and then come back for more money. And oh, by the way, we're building this rec department too. Building.
I
You know,
don't- I don't deny your experience at all.
I think we're being very naive. I want all of these things. I mean, gee whiz, I want to buy a lottery ticket every time there's $1 billion because I have grandiose plans in my head what I would all do for the school district with that money. I want those things, but I think we have to be reasonable people and presenting to our community, our citizens, our senior citizens, our young new families who are going to be our clients someday, you know, semi-retired, who all of the people you've listed, we're not being reasonable to them to say 13% this year and oh, by the way, more money next year. It's not reasonable. It's not reasonable.
Can I say, you know, it's a just lighten up the you know, atmosphere also, because the age of screening colonoscopy has decreased to 45. I am seeing a lot of, you know, young families more colonoscopy is 45. So
this is what we're
the
talking
reason
about.
I'm saying
Does
is
this
that-
mean it's time to vote?
Can
Does this mean it's time to
I have
vote?
another question before.
So the reason I'm saying is that I have a lot of patients, and I not only serve 65 plus, I also serve 45 plus of my
And we thank you for it.
So what I'm hearing, I have brought to the table what I'm hearing the concerns. So just kind of wanted to kind of bring a little bit of laughter because I'm sure.
And you talk to them under sedation, so
I
we
was
know
just
they're
gonna
telling
say,
the truth.
They're
I
totally
couldn't talk
And
about
please ask your
balloon
question.
payments, but you can talk about colonoscopies.
Mr. Comey, can I ask a question? With Dr. Khan's motion on the table, which we're saying is a 5% tax increase versus a 13% tax increase, is there anything that we lose in your budget by changing that other than the amount of defeasance?
No, it would simply be a change in the debt levy versus anything else.
So long-term, we pay more is kind of how, or not, or
So again,
non-interest.
it depends on how those dollars are used, right? We could use those as a first payment or to apply towards the first payment to save 20 years of interest on it. You could defease now, but if you choose to defease existing debt, I guess it would depend on how it's structured. It might be able to take off a year or it might just lower that last payment. If you choose to use it as a first payment on new debt, like it wouldn't affect any of the existing debt. It just takes 20 years of interest off of, I think it's an additional $3.5 million.
Linda, it does decrease the amount that we owe long-term. It does,
Is that a question, or is it what do you want me to say?
you're over here you're saying, and you've asked several times, you've asked Mr. Cromie, do you really believe that this increases, or that this decreases the amount of money that we owe over time? The answer to that question is yes.
And the next question would be, given that it's 13 years from now.
Do
what
you
is the
understand
time
that the
value
answer
of
to that
money?
question is yes? Do you understand that the answer to that question is yes?
And then
Okay,
the
thank you.
next question is, what's the time value of that money?
Yeah.
And it was only been 50,000. We saved 50,000 on last year's defeasance.
I think
We're getting off track here.
I think,
Move along.
can we do maybe a roll call
I
of the
would-
vote, please?
Yeah,
please?
Board President
yes,
Sprague, I'd like
yes,
to call for a vote.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Dr. Khan,
wait, what are we voting on?
we're voting on the
The
amendment
amendment.
that
Voting on the
Dr. Khan has made.
Thank you.
Dr. Khan,
Yes.
Mrs. Sapersky,
Yes.
Mrs. Yank,
I vote yes.
I vote yes. Mr. Sprague,
I vote yes.
Dr. Beer,
Yep, yes.
and Mrs. Witkowski.
I'm tempted to say no, but I'm going to say yes.
Yep.
Motion
Is
passes
this where we're supposed to all clap?
7-0.
No, you're not. You don't do anything.
So this will
Thank
be
you.
your
All right,
motion.
So now I'd like to call for a vote I'd like to vote on the
Budget as
original,
amended.
the budget, move to adopt the 23-24 budget as amended.
Second.
Yeah, we already had that moved and
No,
second,
it's-
so.
yeah, it's already been made and
All right,
seconded.
that's
Thank
okay.
you, though.
So now we're
Okay.
voting on the budget as amended.
Yes,
Do you want to do a roll call on this one?
Yeah,
yes, it has.
we
we
have
have
to.
to, yeah.
Oh,
It
okay.
has money.
Very
so we
good.
have
Yeah,
to.
money. we have to.
Mrs. Yank,
Yes, I vote yes.
I also vote aye. Mr. Sprague,
Yes,
Dr. Beer,
Yes.
Mrs. Witkowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Sapersky,
Yes.
Dr. Khan.
Yes.
That motion also passes 7-0.
Okay, for the overall tax levy, the new number is up here on the board.
All right.
This one up here, the 36,465, 542.
I move that we adopt the total levy of $36,465,542.
Second.
do we have to say certify rather than
Certified.
Um,
I'd like to amend my motion to say
Yeah.
certify rather
Thank
than
you.
adopt.
And I will second that amended.
All right, motion was made by Dr. Beer, seconded by Mrs. Sapersky. We have a roll call, please.
I vote aye. Mrs. Witkowski,
Yes.
Dr. Khan,
Yes.
Mr. Sprague,
Yes,
Mrs. Yank,
Yes.
Dr. Beer,
Yes.
and Mrs. Sapersky.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
All right, and then like 5 minutes, we get to start the budget for next year. Just
it's
kidding.
already started.
5 minutes ago.
all right, policy, I'm looking for a motion to adopt policy 4130, driver alcohol and drug testing as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion was made and seconded, made by Dr. Beer, seconded by Mrs. Yank. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. I'm looking for a motion to sunset board policies 4241 and 4242.
So moved.
Second.
Motion was made by Dr. Beer, seconded by Mrs. Witkowski. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Looking for a motion to approve policy revisions to release time for religious instruction 6122 and summer school 6451.
So moved.
Second.
Motion was made by Mrs. Larson, seconded by Mrs. Yank. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. School Board Liaison Reports.
I'll just quick plug for the Franklin Education Foundation, for which I am the liaison. We will have our Educate in Style fashion show event on November 18th. I would encourage all of you to come. It'll be fabulous and fashionable and raises a whole lot of money to be able to award the grants that our teachers come to us with for educational innovation in their classrooms and different things like that. So please join us on November 18th. It'll be so fun.
I met with Mr. Volo at the high school and with CISA, and I will have examples of those reports that I will provide to the board when we do our workshop, so that we can see what a
Perfect.
report would look like. So we'll talk about that on Monday. And then we'll put the report in the next agenda item. School and community engagement reports. Oh, please, Maksud.
I met with the Pleasant View Elementary principal as a board liaison. I had a good discussion, and the good thing about Pleasant View, only 2 teachers have left, and the aides have left there mostly because of the benefits and the salary, and also Pleasant View is working on, because I think we had decrease in math scores and improvement in the English. So they're trying to implement where a handoff is done between, for example, third and, if the student goes from 3rd to 4th grade, the teacher from 3rd grade is giving a handoff to the teachers in the 4th grade about, okay, this kid has these are the challenges, these are the area of focus, we need to kind of, continue that. So the work which was done by the third grade teacher continues for the fourth grade teacher. So I think it's more about individualized attention to the kids. I think this is great work, and that's my report for the year. Thank you.
Thank you. School and community engagement reports.
OB continues to be the service dog of record for Forest Park Middle School.
There have been lots of exciting things happening with our various teams and activities and clubs.
Yes.
I think we can celebrate lots and lots of things coming up, so just.
And please consider going to the high school play next weekend.
Oh, yeah, thank you, yeah.
Yeah, you have 5 choices.
Five.
It's Thursday,
yes.
Thursday, Friday, 2 on Saturday, 1 on Sunday, so
my
plenty
goodness.
of opportunity to go see.
What is the play?
What's the play?
It is called Dorothy.
Dorothy meets Alice,
Alice.
something
Like
or
a
other.
Fairy tale mashup.
Fairy tale mashup.
It's Dorothy. It's Wizard of Oz plus Alice in Wonderland.
still
I've
play.
heard it's very funny. I have not seen it.
Meaning not a musical.
There may be 2 children of board members who are in it, so I'm just saying you should go.
And I also just want to put another plug in for the fashion show. This is a cooperative fashion show, so we have 40 students representing various clubs and activities, and our MCs are going to be our outgoing and current athletic and activities directors, and it's a really neat opportunity to sort of showcase the wide variety of things that students are doing in their free time at Franklin. Thank you very much.
When is that?
August, November 18th.
Oh, it's a while out there yet.
The tickets are on sale. Watch for the auction.
Future agenda items, Friends of Franklin recognition, WASB honor roll recognition, 24-25 school calendar, Franklin Forward High School visioning, policies 4215, 5120, 5260, 5500, 5802, first read. Pleasant View Elementary School presentation, annual assessment report, coherence plan update, and board clerk's report, election notice. School board member comments, perhaps we've had enough of those.
Could I just ask a
Please.
question? The next time we talk about this visioning, would it be possible to hear from the principal at Countrydale, since it seems like her school has so many issues? I'd kind of like to hear her take on some of like the pictures that we saw. Would that be possible or no?
Yeah, absolutely. Her voice would have come through with Janine and Ashley that were here tonight too. Like she couldn't be here tonight, but absolutely.
That's what I kind of figured, but.
Yeah,
just-
yeah, they all work together on it. We actually all met this morning again too.
Thank you. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved. Second.
Motion was made by Mrs. Larson, seconded by Mrs. Witkowski. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned at 9:26.